Hello, everybody. I'm just letting Christine get hooked up and
Nope, I'm
looking
here.
for our guests. Okay, good. So I'll go on mute now until we get really find our guests.
Okie dokie.
Liesl and Kim and Tim, if you're here, I'm going to invite you to be co-hosts. It's the way that we can allow you to speak but keep everyone else muted. So when you get the request, do you mind accepting it, please? Thanks. And Christine, I don't know if you have any music, but you're welcome to put it on if you want. Okay.
I'm just this. I'm sort of taken aback, MJ, because this is a whole different playing field for
It
us
is.
right now, right?
Yeah.
I'm sort of sitting here looking with my jaw hanging open at the screen, and all the little beeps and buzzers and boxes are popping up. I
Yeah.
didn't
Okay,
anybody would
focus.
be here.
Focus.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry, smack myself in the face there. It's like, whoa.
Can you do that? And I'll keep an eye out for Kim.
Okay. Did you see Tim and Liesl are here? I saw
Yeah,
them.
I got them already, so that's good. Okay, any luck, Christine? Or do I want to start singing? Because I know you have a good voice.
Don't tempt me.
You can just probably just play anything from your phone right off your computer while we get the last. Okay, so who
Hear
are
me, MJ?
if you're an expert here, people, we do have the chat is open. I actually thought that I had put it so I wouldn't hear all the beeps every time someone enters. Do you guys, if anybody happens to know, is there a time way I can change that after the space has started?
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Host tools. Yeah, I look there.
What are you trying to unmic them?
No, I'm trying so that when people pop in, there's no sound. But on my screen, Brenda, I don't see that anything about that being able to change that.
Ding dong. That's
Yeah,
what it.
I thought I did do it before the meeting started, Brenda. Anyway, hopefully, you know what? It may just be like we'll have to pretend we're in some
We're
sort
just
of like
gonna
a
limp our way through this first one. Like
we'll just have to pretend like we're in a waiting room somewhere else, and when people come in and out of the door that dings, we get used to it, we ignore it, and that'll just
it's
have
the
to be what
part
we
where
do
we go,
tonight.
nice knockers.
I'm sorry? Who's nice knockers?
From what's his name from the Mel Brooks movie, when she bangs on the door, ding dong, nice knockers. Gary Gar, young Frankenstein.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I do
Um,
find it a funny way for you to start our space, and we are back, people.
Oh my God. It's been like a New York minute,
It
right?
has been a minute. So I'm just going to look one last thing. I mean, I'll keep
Oh,
checking.
Sue just said they don't hear the ding dong.
Oh, so it's just
Okay.
in my, oh, it's probably just in my head.
No, it's in my head
Okay,
too.
so that
So you and
means
I can hear
that,
it.
for our guests who we've made co-hosts, you may be hearing it too. So I apologize for that through the evening if it's going to be irritating to you. If
So
you
you
want
can
to quit,
suck it
you can
up
tell
and
me
get
now.
over it, MJ. Come on. We're
I know.
finally back on the airwaves, for
I know.
God's
I've already
sake.
screwed it up. Okay, I'm going to keep looking for Kim. Um, okay. Yeah, okay. So I don't see Kim yet, but I'm going to check
What?
my messages
What?
and then we'll get started with the space. I'm sure she'll join as soon as she can.
Okay. What's
I'm just checking both. She's been talking to me from two different.
Oh, okay. Somebody's just sorry. Sorry. We're just settling in, everyone. It's just kind of like some new learning curves for us because we haven't used this platform before for anything like this. And we really wanted to get ourselves kind of back and chit-chatting again, right, MJ?
Yes. I'd be more engaging right now, but I want to send this to
Send what to where?
yeah, I'm just communicating with Kim. So you're gonna have to take the space for a second.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, it's great to be back. We're just kind of trying to limp our way through. We've been looking at some different platforms because we've had a lot of people messaging us and asking us when we're going to be back. And we've had lots of people who are willing to come and talk to us. We just need to figure out the place, the space, the platform for us. We looked at Bluecast, which is a third party space, talk space. We don't think it's compatible for us. At this point. So we thought we wanted to get a couple of interviews in because we've had people who are sort of sitting in the wings now for us that we'd like to have a chat to. And we kind of wanted to get moving on with that. So MJ, like I'm feeling like I've got run on and on chatter here.
No, you're
Are you?
good. You're
Oh,
great at that.
oh thanks. Oh God.
Hey,
Back in the
everybody.
saddle again, right?
Yeah, hang in there. I'm just sending one more message and then,
Where is Kim?
oh, that's what I'm figuring out. I'm just making sure that she has the correct link. And then so I've messaged her and told her, asked her to message me when she gets in. And that way I'll know to look for her. Okay.
MJ, don't
Because there's lots for us to talk about right now.
you?
Yeah, so that is not a problem, is it? So,
You.
I guess first off,
MJ, this is Liesl. Would you like me to send her a quick text message?
sure you can. What I did was I DM'd her both on Twitter and in Blue Sky just to tell her to look just above for the link and to message me in the chat when she's here. But if you have access to her text, that would be awesome. I just want to make sure she's not having any problem.
Yeah, on it.
And
Okay,
there's
thanks.
Liesl coming to the rescue
Here she is. So
again.
this is why we have her
You know it. Yeah,
here. Okay, so
absolutely.
why don't we start off? And I feel badly because Lisa should be hearing this just because, but we can re-welcome her when we introduce her. So hello, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 29th, 2025, and we are here with episode 100.
Yay, ding,
Woo!
ding, ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding.
that's what all the
Happy
dings are for.
birthday to
Episode
us.
100 of Resistors, Christine. It's nuts. It's taken us a few months to get back in the saddle, even just to get to 100. But I can't believe we've done that many. I mean, for anybody who hasn't, followed us from the start, we actually started these spaces as a place. Well, we were doing them over on Twitter, Twitter Spaces, as a place to highlight really awesome women, like people who had really interesting stories or had overcome amazing things or had done amazing things, really inspiring and heartfelt, all that. So we had started interviewing a number of people from our nursing community who we love to environmentalists. I can't even, it's so far and so many years ago now, Christine, it's even hard to
Well,
list
there's
them all.
so many. We've covered
Yeah.
like families,
Yeah.
the
Oh, the
autism
autism. Yeah.
community,
Autism portfolio, like families. Yeah.
long-term care,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Healthcare
the
in general.
educational, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All of that, public health,
I think we did about,
engineers,
yeah.
virologists, immunologists.
Yeah. And
We've
I think it
spoken
was around
to
then when we did about 26 episodes and then we started to see, this was now the fall of 2022. And we were like, okay, people are having a hard time, it seems like, getting real accurate information about COVID and stuff, right? And we were still, you know, aware of that it should be out there, but people were having a hard time kind of accessing this stuff. And so we said, well, why don't we do a couple of a couple of spaces on it? And luckily by then we had sort of developed, at least some cred in the Twitter sphere. And so we were lucky that we had some people who we considered experts in certain areas,
So lucky.
who would come on and talk to us. And it was actually, people might know her as Meet Jess. It was Jess who was our first one in our COVID series. She, is very involved with dementia care. She's an expert in that area. And we had quite a great chat with her for our first one. And now this is our 80th COVID series episode. Now we
Mhm.
have covered like the gauntlet as far as the topics regarding COVID. Like it's been social psychology. It's been, like we said, healthcare, virology, epidemiology. It's politics and just like yeah,
Survivor. It's Survivor.
yeah,
We've
yeah.
watched the emergence of the movement of like direct benefit mutual aid has
Yes.
really emerged. We've seen that really emerge. And if
And
we
long
thought
COVID.
getting yeah, long COVID,
Like
absolutely.
we actually, our first conversations about long COVID were in those first spaces that we did. And
Yep.
that was in the beginning of 2022. And we were
Right.
like,
And
hey, and that's when we started interviewing some people. And,
that's when
this,
that led us to Dr. Parego, Elisa Parego,
that's
remember?
right.
Because wasn't she the person who coined the
Long
expression
COVID.
long COVID?
Yes. And she's been one of our guests a couple of times. Well, yeah, she's kind of one time, but officially, but has come in and made
Listen, you
comments.
know
And
what? Once you're tethered to the resistors, you're
yeah,
always tethered to
yeah, whether
resistors.
you
What
like it
can
or
I
not.
say? Yeah, totally.
So I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for following us and for waiting for us to find our way. This is still not the probably going to be the permanent setting, though I suppose if it works out easily and we figure it out smoothly, this might be. I don't really know, but I know for now, just the Zoom program we have really only allows about 100 people, I think, to listen in live. Um, and then what we're going to do is we've had a YouTube channel for a while. That's where we posted our 3 long COVID interviews, like 2 with Tracy, right?
Yep,
Right. And one with Ty, who's
yep.
speaks Boston Marathon. You guys might know him. And then that's where we also posted our interview with Professor Lydia Maraska. That's really worth checking out. And so were the other interviews, though they're from a while back now. So that's what we had that channel for a while, to have a place for those long COVID conversations, because we didn't have those live. We wanted those to be just us and the person we were interviewing. And we did actually think that we would continue on and do a lot more of those way back then. And it really was just a matter of, like everything else, every day was something new coming up. And we were trying to, you would just go, oh gosh, this seems like fairly urgent. We should probably talk about that. And often it was about long COVID, only it wasn't where Christine or I had the capacity to also, do additional ones. And I wish we had done more of those. I know that there were people we talked about doing them with, and I'm always like, oh, I really wish we had, though I do try to give us some grace, because it's not like we've been screwing the pooch. You know what I'm saying? This is number 100, so we're trying.
What? We're not raking in the grift here on
Oh
this one,
yeah,
is
right.
it? Like,
I
cha-ching.
wish.
Like,
I
are you
can't even
not?
spell grift to get money out of this thing. So anyway, listen, we're back, and we're really happy that you're all back. Thanks so much for your support, and for us even sticking around for me setting up deleting and then setting a new Zoom session. So anyway, thanks for that. A couple of things. So Christine, I mean, we have a few months to cover. We're not going to get into everything that has happened to us,
Oh
but we
gosh.
did, our last one was the very last week of October. And it was a great space. And we thought we would probably get to episode 100. And then we thought, well, we really want to maybe make that a little bit, special kind of thing. Or I should say more special than our other ones, but, just to have something specific. And then, like, I know for me, I lost my brother in November.
Take a breath.
I always think I'm going to be able to say it. Anyway, so as one does, you got to step away because that's the stuff that matters the most, right? And then Christmas and all the other things and things that you were going through too, Christine. And I just think it's really important to share that with people. Not all our dirty details, but for sure that like it's very rarely that we didn't talk about, oh, when are we going to get back on, right? We talked about that a lot. We just had a shit ton going on,
Well, life
right?
life gets in the way, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I've had my time. I mean, I won't lie, the breaking the arm has really knocked me off my center mark. And that was a really tough time because every time I would, I'd hear the sound of those doors, those doors when they open, those automatic, whoosh, they make that whooshy sound kind of
Yeah.
thing. And every time I'd walk up to the hospital, to the clinic, every single time, and those doors open, I think to myself, is this going to be the time it's going to get me? Because I mean, I feel like I've had to come through the Boer Wars to get myself through, to protect myself in a healthcare setting, to get treatment. I just wanted treatment. That's all I wanted was, and that was a really tough, that's been a really long year and a half for me. So we've had our time, but you know what? We're still here, right?
Yeah.
MJ?
Yeah, we are here, and I've pulled myself together in terms of I'm at least can speak now. Uh, I don't know if you've had any luck, Liesl. You can either just message us in the chat or say it's up to you if Kim's having any issues, but that's fine. Um, One of the things that we did, of course, talk about, Christine and I, most recently, and why we jumped to Zoom was because as the time passed and we realized, wow, it's January, we still haven't done one. We luckily have wonderful people who agreed to join us tonight, and I think it's going to make a really great 100th episode. But we did
I
realize
agree.
that it just didn't feel right to be doing a Twitter space in the environment that has been created, over there. We know, Christine, you've completely left your personal account. You've closed down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and resistors, Christine and I chatted quite a bit about it, and we've kept it open, at least for me, like to share the spaces and stuff. But also a little bit because, we have heard from people saying that the concept, especially those who are suffering even just emotional exhaustion, but certainly chronic illness and stuff, that it's the idea of starting somewhere new and building another community or trying to find this one kind of over on another platform, especially when not everybody's gone to the same other platform, right, is seems really daunting to some people. And so we toggle with the idea of like, well, any sort of support is you're supporting a Nazi. Pardon the use of the term. I know it's offensive.
Fucking Nazi would probably be more appropriate.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah. And
MJ.
so
Sorry for the potty mouth.
no, it's okay. No, I totally get that. And yet I'm also thinking about the people who are just asking, sort of please don't leave us behind or at least give us some
Right.
time kind of thing. And that's the only reason we're kind of lingering is to help people get some time. So we are continuing to look for platforms where we can do that kind of thing. Like have an audio space. We really, really loved the interactive part of Twitter Spaces, and even now, right? In the chat is really cool. I can kind of see what everybody says. It's kind of fun to see that, and there's a few emojis. There really is something energizing and really kind of soothing about knowing that you're all out there and live listening. And so whether this ends up being the space or whether we end up just doing like an audio podcast that we can share immediately after it's recorded and people can listen, instantaneously or listen all together then. Or even if I've even, does anybody watch Dateline? They do
On
that,
occasion.
the crime things. So, I've listened to the stories, but then they'll do Talking Dateline and they'll just have this live chat between, the people who host it and stuff about one of the stories that they did. And they'll talk about how they did all that and stuff. So my husband would just say, maybe there's room for that sometime where you do a recording. So you can do it literally anytime that it suits a guest right? Or that we can do. And then we post it and then give people a chance to watch it. And then you and I could maybe do a live thing somewhere like this, about like a half an hour thing where we talk about, what that conversation was like and other things that maybe didn't make it in the recording or whatever. Anyway, so it's, there's lots of different things. We're happy to hear people's ideas. If you know of great audio spaces that would give us that. We're really not into having the video on as well. This is,
I know I saw Barry ask that. And I'm like, damn it. Then
oh,
I
did
have to
he?
put pants on or
No,
something,
Barry,
right?
no. At least not now, because you know what that adds? It adds for me the extra stress of feeling the need to at least pull myself together somewhat.
There's that.
And I know I was just cleaning the leak of a toilet in a bathroom before coming home.
Thank you for sharing that, MJ.
Yeah, you're
Like
welcome. The toilet was clean. It was just overflowing. We don't know why. And so I'm like, holy cheers, like not now.
Rhett didn't drop something in there, did he?
No,
Because sometimes they do that. We had a dog
my
drop
dog does not
a
use it.
dog bone into the toilet and clogged it up once.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Okay. Anyway, no, for me,
Yeah.
I don't want to turn cameras on because it's too much of an overload on my brain to see all the little faces and boxes and everything. And it's really, you know what? Here's the thing,
Yeah.
MJ,
Yeah.
is that we both recognize that having these chit chats and these sort of curated spaces are going to become even more important now that they're turning off the taps of the information everywhere. Like
Yeah.
they're not counting, like we're seeing that all the shutdown of the pages in the US, all like the CDC pages and the NHS stuff, and they're turning off the taps of everything. And so we're honestly, I feel like we're the goddamn resistance now. Like I feel like this is
Yeah.
we're outer rim and we're on the base and
Yeah.
we're like checking for signals and we're like, who's got the information? Who can share it? Like, where's our R2D2 unit with like, I mean, this is when people like the Moriarty Lab, and I see Joe Vipon and Liesl and all these
Yeah.
and Kim and all these guys continuing to put information out there. Nick Sergis,
Yeah.
Chris is here. Chris
Yeah, there's
Delta.
so many people in here. Almost, I would argue that most people in here are people I've seen sharing the good stuff. And like you said, not only is it sort of gone dark out there, and someone mentioned in the chat, it's like info blackout right now, but it's going to start being less, not even just a blackout, but it's going to be starting to get filled with the wrong stuff,
Right.
right? The gap is big, and this is the way the gap. I'm going to get so distracted by the chat. The gap is big, and that's when the disinformation fills it, right? Or when the
Did you see the other day I put a post up. Remember last fall when everybody was losing their shit about black spatulas?
about what?
Black spatulas.
Oh,
Remember
yes,
that? Get rid of
yes,
those black spatulas in your kitchen. And everybody went running out and they got rid of it all, right?
yeah,
So last week, my daughter sent me a link. She goes, Mom, remember that black spatula thing? He's like, yeah. She's like, read this.
yeah,
Well, it turned out they were wrong. They had made a miscalculation. And you know how that goes when it
yeah,
goes at the beginning. It's like the domino factor all the way through. But they was wrong. But here's the thing about good science is that when they make a mistake, they'll tell you they made a mistake. They'll tell you what the mistake was as well,
yeah.
right?
You know what? That is a really good point. That's a really
Mm-hmm.
good point. And you know what? That's something that I think we've been really fortunate with. I think it's partly we've chosen these people, but it's we've chosen them to ask them to come on, like different guests based on the fact that we see that they have a humility and willingness to admit when they've been mistaken. So, we've had a few people on who've been like, okay, well, to me, it's looking like it's going to be this based on this, this, and this. And then when it's not, it's like, great, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And this is why. I think this is might be why I thought it this way, but it actually ended up being this way. We learned something new. And I think that's been the issues. There's just been such little humility in the roles that we really need there to be some
Or
for
common
something that we know
sense,
is changing and ongoing, right?
right? And
Yeah.
where's the common sense? Like, I mean, this is practical stuff. Has anybody been watching any of the the hearings with RFK getting
Yes.
grilled?
Yes. I
That
caught a little
he's the
bit.
most dangerous man in America. I think he was 6 minutes into it and he told his first lie.
But do you know what's interesting? Did you see Dr. Ziad Al-Ali's post today? And
No, I did.
I
What was
watched
it?
the video and he is thanking RFK Jr. because in this video he commits to prioritizing funding for long COVID research. So there was a Senator Todd Young was the one asking the questions and he was quite explicit about what he meant. And with that, RFK Jr. is saying absolutely there's and he said the number of Americans who are suffering long COVID. He shared the number himself. And they asked him again, like, so you're committing to this? And he said, yes, with great enthusiasm.
I
Yeah.
see Elizabeth put in the chat. Yeah, but he has no respect for science. So what good will that research
Well,
do?
that's a fine question, Elizabeth, and that's the one. So this is a wait and see kind of thing.
You're
But that,
right, Peter. It doesn't counter all the crazy stuff. Oh my God, I think I'm liking this platform better than the Twitter platform.
well, maybe, but we also might just go a little wonky, and we'll all wonder like who's saying what about what. So listen, so here's the moment of truth, and I've already dropped the ball in this session. So Liesl, right up front, I'm apologizing to you because only when I saw your message to me saying, Kim is coming. I remembered that she's actually teaching until for another like 2 or 3 minutes. So she
Yeah.
wasn't
Oh my
going to
God.
be
So
able to come. And I just had you text her probably while she's teaching.
I was, yeah.
oh,
Okay, because she just finished, so
Sorry,
she
Lisa.
needs to find the link. It's okay.
I'll apologize to Kim too. She'll be like, oh my God, woman, what is kidding?
she set you up, Liesl. She set you up.
It is
Yeah, Christine and
okay.
I were giggling. Ha ha, she fell for it. No, just kidding.
You're like a
That's what we
couple
do
of
to our
mean
guests, right? We're
girls
so
over
mean.
here.
So,
Yeah.
so in a few minutes she'll join us. She's gonna go. She's teaching, so she did
Oh,
help.
she's here, by the way. She's
Oh,
here.
is
She showed
she?
up. And by the way, before everyone loses their shit, we are not for RFK, okay? Don't
No,
get
no,
me
I'm just
wrong.
mentioning.
But
So really
people are
quickly,
going, are you kidding me? And I'm like, no, we're not for RFK. The guy's a dangerous lunatic.
so Christine, I just want to answer Kim. So Kim, yes, it won't let you unmute. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to invite you to be a co-host and then you can do that, okay? So
Thank
just
you.
when I invite you, if you can please accept it, that would be great. And then maybe I'll get right in if you'd
Yeah, I
like
see. And we've
Christine
got
to
Kim here.
introducing our
Okay,
guests and then we can have them say hello. What do you think?
have at it.
How about it? I've got to find, we've got 3 guests, so I got to find all their bios. And
There's
I'm actually going to suggest, I'm going to read out Professor Prather's first, but you're going to have to let me know what needs to be updated because I used this from our last time we had you on. But I think something else there are other things have been happening and you can update us. Okay. So over the course of her career, Professor Kimberly Prather, distinguished professor, might I add, has published over 250 papers focusing on atmospheric aerosols. She is the founding director of the NSF Center for Aerosol Impacts on Chemistry of the Environment. It has transferred the full complexity of the ocean atmosphere system into the laboratory where scientists are investigating how ocean biology influences atmospheric chemistry, clouds, and climate. That stuff just sounds so fascinating to me. Her research is expanding to focus on making a global map of airborne microbes to better understand their impacts on human health as our climate changes. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Professor Prather has been active in science communication related to the airborne transmission of SARS-CoV-2. She's given hundreds of media interviews and been an international leader in pushing for policy changes to protect against the spread of this airborne virus and improve indoor air quality. She has advised the White House, Dr. Tony Fauci, the CDC, and many others on the airborne nature of this virus. She really cares about solutions and has helped develop a safe reopening plans for the San Diego Unified School District, numerous businesses, and UC San Diego. Professor Prather has received numerous awards and is an elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, National Academy of Engineering, the National Academy of Sciences, and the American Philosophical Society. So welcome, Professor Prather. You could say hello.
Hello, thank you for
Hello.
having me. Sorry it was a little clunky getting here, but I'm here.
You know what? I just apologized to Liesl and I owe you one. So when we got in here, we immediately started looking for you and Liesl and Tim, right, to make sure we had you and could set you up. And I knew that you hadn't yet received our flow document, which I don't know if you've got it now, but I hope it got to you. Um,
It
so
made it. It made it.
Oh, good. Okay. So I was just like, oh no, maybe you're having even issues with the connections or you've been busy today and didn't see where the post is. And so then Lisa very kindly said, well, would you like me to text her and just see if she's got what she needs? I'm like, thanks. And by the time she got back, I realized like you told us you were teaching and you weren't going to be able to come right at the start. So I'm really sorry that she may have interrupted you on our behalf while you were teaching and causing you stress.
No stress. Nothing like what's been going on. That was nothing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. We've got a pretty low bar to hit, or a high bar, I guess, for stress. Anyway, so welcome, Kim. So, what is new for you? Like I know I read this, but what else is other than the obvious things that we're going to get into? How is how are you doing with your work, and what kinds of things are you doing and working on, even beyond what we'll talk to tonight?
Yeah, oh geez. Like still dealing with helping people the best I can with COVID, because I see in the chat people say it's not over, as we all know.
Yeah.
But I've kind of moved into another world of my last, well, since September, I've been working on sort of dealing with a pretty serious air quality crisis, exposing it at the US-Mexico border. So we have a paper about ready to be launched. It's out there. People are seeing it. It's about people have been breathing really toxic levels of a gas called hydrogen sulfide that everybody hears about from sewage. Long story short, but people have been complaining for a long time, and we went there and sort of measured it and exposed it. And it's been a pretty crazy story of public health, more about public health, kind of in denial, and how to help people with filters and masks and all that. It's been pretty huge, actually. So yeah, I thought COVID was big, and it is big, but this has been really big because it's, my own community. It's a serious environmental injustice, and it turns out that it comes from polluted water that gets in the air and
Hmm.
changes the air all around, and it's everywhere in the whole world. And so I think this is going to be a pretty big issue globally. So I've been
Wow.
doing
Okay.
that.
And I
Yeah.
remember
And
I remember seeing you post some things about it. I'm like, wow, this sounds like it was a little, the details I didn't
yeah, I
I
mean,
didn't have.
everyone, when they, yeah, yeah. So when people see it, they go, oh, yeah, I smell water. Like I've got bad, we've got bad water in the UK or in
Yeah.
Canada, like lakes and rivers and all that. We showed it was a river, not the ocean. And it was just this one spot in the river where all this stuff was coming out. And so, lakes, rivers, wherever you are, people are dumping pollution and thinking they're hiding it, but there's nowhere to hide the pollution anymore. So that's one thing. And then I've gotten pulled into helping people with the Palisades fire here in LA.
Hmm.
And then the Moss Landing fire, so it's just like, our world is changing because of humans. And I've got lots of job security of trying to help everybody understand what they're breathing, which seems to become more and more of an issue. So I can go on and on. I'm happy to answer questions, but it's all about masks and filtration and protecting people. So yeah, I've been doing that on the side.
On the side, just for funsies. But I do love that you're pushing for that. Can I ask you something? So the issue there at the US and Mexico border, how did it become known to you that it was an issue?
Well, it's, 20 miles from my house, and
Oh, it's
it's
that
been
close.
there. And I kept hearing about it, but believe it or not, it started in the 30s,
Huh.
and it got really bad, and people have been screaming about it and being ignored. They are largely underrepresented groups of people, so
Yeah.
they feel like they just don't count, and they haven't. But then they just kept saying, oh, it's just odor, it's just a nuisance. And so we went there to study, what else was in the air and why the air smelled bad. It's not just one thing, right? So we
Yeah.
just went down there, I sort of naively, I had a grant, to go understand how smell could affect air quality, like totally, like just let's just go measure it. And we decided to measure this one gas, this hydrogen sulfide, which is known to be very toxic. And we measured, so urban normal levels, just to calibrate you, of this gas are about less than 1 part per billion. So one, yeah, really low. We measured at some places along this river over 20,000
Oh
parts
my
per
God.
billion.
Wow.
And if you leave out a piece of metal, a copper piece overnight, it's black the next day because the air is so toxic. That's what it does to your lungs too. And
Mm.
they've been screaming. And so we went there when it was picking up and getting really horrible. All these odor complaints were coming in, and we measured, what was in the air. And it turns out the wild part, it's in our paper, which hopefully will be published very soon. We showed that our data, the actual concentrations of this toxic gas in air, tracked the number of complaints from the community. So they were,
Mm.
in essence, the canaries in the coal mine. This is huge. Like the R squared, like the correlation was just off the chart. Like it was a perfect correlation. And so at some point we were yelling so loud, which I learned to do during COVID. They diverted the river. They stopped the river flow from coming. It comes across the US Mexico border. They stopped it. And when they did that, the odor went away, the complaints went away, our
Mm.
measurements went away, like everything changed. So it's an amazing sort of experiment of, how you can actually, expose a problem. And, people now are telling me, the Kim, this is just like Flint, Michigan. This is 1,000 times worse than Flint, Michigan, because it's not just this one gas. There's all these other gases, all these other aerosols, and we're just going to keep going. Groundwater is contaminated. The soil is contaminated. It looks like a war zone where they live. And let me tell you, when we got there, 80 million gallons of raw sewage were flowing through this community, and no one cared.
Well, look at you, Aaron Brockovich.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
No,
don't know.
seriously, for Kim, but you know what? I just got to say something here. What I think is really interesting is that, like myself, for you, we were kind of looking at a global health issue for a while, like dealing with the pandemic and everything. Both you and I have both turned to our community to look at community rooted things where we can affect change and make a difference. Because I know we've both been frustrated out here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just gotta thank you for turning some energy into your inwards into your right where you live in your grassroots. So we
Mm.
don't always have to be having that big enormous reach. Sometimes we can do stuff right in our own backyard.
Indeed. And this is super rewarding. They all kind of know me now, know my group now. My group is in love with this project. We're not done. It's not over, but now they're putting like laws into the books of how to go after. No one had ever thought that the water quality could affect the air quality. Like that, somehow that connection was never made. And as I say, this is now a global problem. And so if we can get this shown there, we can show it so many other places. It's like these poor people are living in they're living in a wastewater treatment plant where
Oh.
where it's just raw sewage and industrial waste. There's these factories on the other side that are US factories, by the way. They're dumping whatever they want. Metals, all this toxic stuff. They don't have the same rules in Mexico. But then karma, the water comes back across the US Mexico border into the US, and then we blame Mexico. It is crazy. So yeah. So I just,
Yeah.
this is a
Wow.
huge, huge issue. I don't think this is the only place it's happening, but we're gonna keep going until we can help this community breathe safe air again. It's a really horrendous situation. But yeah, thank you.
That's amazing. And you know what? It reminds like the last time I think you popped into one of our spaces, we were talking about the award that you were receiving in chemical sciences last year. Is
Hmm.
that right? And
Yep.
you went to that wonderful event, and some of us watched it live, and we saw you accept your award and do your speech stuff. And it's a beautiful building that you were in there. I don't know
That
what.
was the national, yeah, there, well, I don't know if we got it. Yeah, there are celebrations everywhere, but part of it was in the Washington National Cathedral, which was
Yeah,
amazing. But yeah,
yeah, that was pretty amazing. But I have to tell you, really, what the pièce de résistance was there was because I don't know if you recall, but they had a big screen up on the stage, and it would, as the different people were receiving different things, they'd pop up, and your picture and a little bit about you would be up there or whatever. And while you were up there speaking, there happened to be a social media post plastered on that screen to
Yes.
oh
you
yeah,
from the
yeah, yeah,
resistors.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
They
Woo! It's
did.
our resistant going, good luck, Kim. Have fun at the thing. You deserve it, and all that, or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, we made it. It's the only time
We made
Christy and
it.
I will ever make it into one of those kind of events. We thought that was so great. I took a photo of it on the
Yeah,
screen
I think
because
I
it
have
cracked
one
me right up.
too. Yeah, and you know what? I have to tell you, I forgot about that. When I went into the ceremony, like to before it began, and I was sitting there with everybody, like all the people from the whole academy, and I saw it. Like they had pictures up of various things some of us had done, and I saw it pop up. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a resistor. It's like my tweets have now made it onto the I do
That
remember
was
that now.
awesome.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought you were going to
Yeah.
say, as you were sitting there, people were asking you if you knew us.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't, but they must have, obviously they knew I knew you.
Yeah, of
So
course, I'm sure. And
yeah.
they
It
should
was
know
the
us.
secret decoder ring that was the giveaway, right?
Yep. Yeah. Of course. Of course. Yeah.
So thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us, Kim. I'm going to take a second to introduce Liesl as well, because we're going to want to talk to you both about the wildfires that you were involved in, just because we want to learn a little more about what happened, about the air quality and the additional information that you can provide about that, Kim, but also about Liesl's work on the ground. So I'm just going to bring her in and we can have that conversation, okay? So Liesl McConchie is an international expert on how the brain learns and co-author of best-selling book Brain-Based Learning with Dr. Eric Jensen. With over 25 years of experience in education, Liesl bridges her knowledge of how the brain best learns with her experience of teaching to create tangible strategies to support teachers and schools across the globe. She has a rich background in education that includes creating new schools, leading whole school reforms, delivering workshops to educators, and speaking at conferences. As a mother of 3 school-age kids, Liesl has advocated for cleaner indoor air in schools to improve both health and cognition. She is the co-founder of the California Alliance for Clean Air in Schools, an advocacy organization working to improve legislation and regulation of indoor air quality in schools. Liesl was an early advocate for Corsi Rosenthal boxes and currently serves as a director on the Corsi Rosenthal Foundation, a charity organization providing supplies to build CR boxes to under-resourced communities. You could often find Liesl leading school-wide and community events to build Corsi Rosenthal boxes for schools, communities impacted by wildfires, and more. So welcome, Liesl.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having
Hey.
me on.
Hey, Liesl, nice to have you with us here tonight.
Nice to have you back. I don't know if everybody knows, but we did have Liesl amongst a few other different organizations and people who have been working really hard on the indoor clean air movement in schools on over a year, about a year and 4 months ago, maybe. And I only know that sort of timeline because that night, the Twitter space, I was the host from my Twitter account. And so that space was logged under me, and it was a fabulous space. The things that you shared and the things that other people shared about what they were doing and how it was going was really, really, I think, inspiring to a lot of people and highly informational.
Thank you.
But at
I can't
that
believe it's been that
time,
long.
yeah, well, what's funny is at that time, I lost my Twitter account inexplicably
Mhm.
and permanently. They would not reinstate it.
Mhm.
They never explained to me why, and lost the space with it. I've been so sad about that ever since because there's so much good stuff in it. I have notes kind of thing, but not the actual space. So I am really honored to have you back, Lisa. We've got this recording, and by God, we're not going to let it go anywhere. So thanks for coming. I have to tell you, I know so many people who, well, I'm part of Ontario School Safety, where we're doing
Yeah.
similar things, and I know how many people in our org often, when we're working on something, like, well, remember Lisa worked on, did something about that. Maybe we can look at her stuff. So you've really, for a lot of people, become a really solid resource because your things are very practical and they're very, well, I can see your background in education. I can see how you approach things to make people feel like they want to listen and that they're not being shamed or whatever for the choices they made so far or what or not knowing what you're talking about, you know that. So just so you know, from my perspective, you've been really impactful to a lot of people. So thanks for all the work you've done.
Thank you. I really try.
Yeah, yes, you do. More than the people that should be who are getting paid for it, right? Like,
Right,
isn't
right.
everybody here? I think everybody can give a little heart icon down at the bottom, your reaction, the heart thing, and go, yeah, we're all working a little harder than we should. That's everybody here because everybody here, every time they share a study that they've seen online or they make a comment or share, a tip on how to do this, if someone's asking, so and so got COVID in my house and blah, blah, blah. Everybody here is been doing things that has helped somebody somewhere along the way, probably way more times than anybody realizes. Just wearing a mask out, we know that think of the number of times you've prevented someone else from getting sick
Right.
because of it, right? So we're really grateful to everybody doing that. So Liesl, and I think maybe this is Christine, I was really wanting to get into just learning some details really about how things started for you, your work with the wildfires in California, and how you ended up getting so involved and sort of how you got, all the supplies and got all those things going. And then we'll probably talk to Kim a little bit about her role in all that too. Does that work
Yeah.
for you, Christine?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Did you want to just sort of start, Lisa? Was it like you can decide how you
Sure.
want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to like just make a comment. Somebody just said that, uh, there's so many people on this call doing wonderful things. There's probably people who feel like, oh gosh, I wish I could be doing more. And I just want people to know that I spent the first couple of years of the pandemic being like a passive receiver or an active receiver of all this wonderful information and resources and learning from so many people, beginning with Dr. Prather. And it wasn't until I kind of like found my own little niche in this that I was able to realize that I do have something to contribute and there's a space for me in here. And I just want to invite people as we see what's going on in the world to just kind of reflect on what your talents and strengths are, what skill sets you bring, because we need everybody working together towards this and to find your space. And so for me, listening to Kim's bio, I'm just like, oh gosh, what am I even doing here? Right? But so like my little space is my background's in education. And so I know schools really well, and schools are a dominant source of transmission. And the work that I do in like reforming schools pedagogy, I was like, how is that useful? Well, what I do is I come in and I'm a bit of a systems thinker, and I'm like, okay, how do we systemically change things here at this school? And it's not like, oh, one person doing this, one person doing that, but how do we equitably make change? And so as we, went through those first couple of years of the pandemic, I was able to stand back and think, okay, hold on a second. Like masks are going to be like vilified, vaccines are going to be controversial, and not like I believe that for myself at all, but I could see that happening. I was like, okay, what is the systemic solution? What's the equitable solution here? And I was like, it's going to be universal clean indoor air. And so that has been my main like goal, is to like push and to fight for that. And because I understand teachers, like teachers are my people, schools are my people. I talk to superintendents and principals all the time for my quote unquote real job. And so I know what matters to them, how to speak to them. And that's why I have, I stopped just like doing my own thing off to the side and just sharing my own story and wanted to like share resources with other people. And so that's how I ended up creating, the slides that Mario here is talking about. Like I've created a few web pages like secretly hidden in my regular website, with like email templates for families and like presentations that people can modify, and just trying to share, here's how you, because that's what I do. I get into a school and I try to help schools and motivate them to make some changes in some way. And usually it's around their pedagogy based on my background in cognitive neuroscience. So it's just different content that we're working with here. So I just wanted to say that, like, so everyone, like, just pause, reflect, find your niche, get in here. We need web designers, we need graphic designers, we need communication specialists, we need everyone to help with the work that we're doing to get clean air to people. So that's my little pitch. But then to the wildfires.
That was
So,
a great pitch, and it's exactly what I think we start to see people do is really finding their niches, right? Like, I mean,
yeah.
I think about Christine, but Christine, I think often about you when you think of how, like, how and where are you going to make the impacts that suit you best? And I see it when, as a wedding officiant, Christine goes with her mask. She goes and immediately asks, "Where can I plug this in?" Meaning her purifier, right? Like, and and she's doing things outside, and et cetera, et cetera. She also will often talk about her local businesses and how she's helped this one in particular make, check their air quality, introduce them to what a CO2 monitor is. And that's because is the kind of person who has developed herself in her community. So people respect her and know her. And so then that's her superpower, right? She goes and takes that to the places that she'll have the most impact, I think, plus all this stuff, right? But I think
Yeah.
it's a really good example of what you're saying, Liesl.
Yeah. Thanks.
Liesl, I used your slides to do a presentation to my local OSPCA because they got shut down.
Oh
They
my.
shut down for 10 consecutive days because all the staff was sick and all the volunteers had been sick.
Yeah.
And I had been donating to them on a regular basis. And I took some stuff in and I said to them, I want to make a presentation. And I said, I think I can help you with this problem. And I did a presentation with them. So now I'm currently working on getting some courses in my local OSPCA.
Hooray, way to go.
Well, I also came at it. I didn't even really talk about COVID. I just talked about airborne, and I talked about, and the other elephant in the room was allergies. I go, these places are dander pits.
Mhm.
I said, come on, like get with the program, like particles in the air, and when you kind of give it to that. But I did use your. I think I actually reached out to you, and you gave me a link for something. You said, here, Coop, try this. And I was
Okay.
like, thank you. And then I was off to the races, right? I was like, okay, I'm going with my Liesl slides. I'm good,
Did
right?
you actually use the term dander pits?
Yeah, yes, I actually used the word dander pit because they
Um,
are dander pits.
I know you're just so funny with your terms. So,
Well, I
Lisa,
think that so many of us we were all trying to kind of invent this wheel, and everyone is just creating these things for the first time, and all these families are just so worn out and stressed out,
Hmm.
and it's just so stressful. I was like, why are we all trying to do the same thing? I was like, let's just kind of collect, and it's not like my stuff is the best. I was just like, start with something so people aren't having to start from scratch. So
it's excellent. It's
I'm
excellent.
glad it's been useful for so many people.
Yeah, it really has. And so speaking of useful for so many people, so the wildfires,
Yeah.
how did you get a phone call, or did someone say, "Can you help these people?" Or did you just say, "I think I can help these people"?
I got an email. I have been the face of this effort, but it really was a team effort. So I need to give a massive shout out to James is one of the board members on the Corsi Rosenthal Foundation who initially sent an email to the board and was like, "Hey, look, these fires in LA are they're getting pretty nasty. We should probably do something." And so we had just had a bunch of email exchanges back and forth as a board. What do we do? We just like, can we ship some stuff into LA? But things were such a mess in LA. I mean, they still are, but things were so chaotic that we didn't know who to send them to, how to get them to anything. And I was like, there's traditionally the Corsi Rosenthal Foundation, when someone applies for a grant, we send them the supplies so that they can do the building. And because we want them to turn it into like a STEM project or like a little community event so people can have the experience of building. And so that's our typical model. And I was like, what if I was the one who said, what if you send the supplies to me and I have all of our San Diego neighbors, LA is our neighbor. All of our San Diego people like build and then we just deliver them. it just seems like a more loving thing to do instead of like, hey, here's some supplies, build it for yourself while you're like being evacuated. And so we like quickly jumped on an emergency board meeting call, and we hashed out all the logistics of how could we actually do this. Multiple board members were coordinating multiple things from behind the scenes. So behind the scenes, we had one board member who was like managing all of the ordering and like making sure that, you know, hundreds and hundreds of fans were coming to me and hundreds of filters were coming to me and the duct tape was being delivered. And so I didn't have to do any of that. Just like a giant truck would show up in my drive yard. I was like, oh, here we go. Here's the next shipment. And then people, mostly this was James on our board, he was coordinating with multiple aid organizations on the ground in LA, vetting all of the requests. Where are we going to be sending this to? Putting together an itinerary for me so that as soon as we were done building, we could throw them in the U-Haul that also was reserved for me. And we could just drive up to LA. And he was like, you're stopping here, and there's going to be 5 different organizations waiting there for you. And they're just going to take stuff out of the truck, and then you can head to the next stop. 3 different orgs are going to be waiting for you there. And they're going to take, you know, this many and this many, give them this and this. And James was just a total hero and mastermind behind all of this. And other members of the board were coordinating other things. And, you know, Jim Rosenthal is in Texas, and he houses the, you know, almost 5,000 filters that 3M had donated to us a couple months prior. But the irony is that we were delayed in this whole project because the filters were in Texas. I'm in San Diego, fires are in LA, and we couldn't get the filters out of Texas because of that massive freeze that they were experiencing. There wasn't any like shipments happening because they were having their own climate catastrophe. So
Oh,
we
that's
couldn't support,
crazy.
yeah, we couldn't support a climate catastrophe happening in California because of another climate catastrophe happening in Texas.
Wow.
And I was like,
Yeah.
this is a
Wow.
thing.
Yes.
Um, and so that's how it like happened the first weekend. I just reached out to several people in our silk coating group here in San Diego, and people just showed up with very little notice into my backyard. And we just started building, and we built 150 that first weekend in just a little bit of time. And it was so lovely and so just uplifting. And like, my kids were just so inspired by it and so inspiring to be with. My 6-year-old woke up that morning. He's like, I can't wait to build CR boxes today. And I was like, oh my
Oh, see, you
God, I
know what?
know.
And that's what it is. It's that, well, one, just a great example for your kids and anybody else who is involved in that. It is that it is inspiring and it feels good to help, right?
Yeah,
And it's a
it
very
really does.
simple thing to say, but I mean, we know the saying, look for the helpers, and in some of the darkest and scariest times for people, somehow the way you feel you can help in something where you really have no control over it is just in those ways, right? And so to just, I'm sure your excuse me, your son was probably just imagining just how great some people would feel after probably going through one of the worst times of their lives, you know?
Mhm.
And it's really
Yeah.
amazing. I loved seeing all the photos that you shared about everybody chipping in, and you were very well organized in your garage space, I have to tell you. The way
Thank
my
you.
garage is, I'd have to burn my garage down to make room for stuff. It's
I
such
was
a
a little
mess.
embarrassed. Yeah, I was a little embarrassed everyone being able to see our garage. I was like, oh gosh, it's a little
Oh
messy.
no, I couldn't see anything but the boxes and the
Very
fans and
good.
all that. That's all I was focusing on. I did notice, I thought it was really spectacular, your one post about the amount of waste that you ended up with. Can you just talk about that? Because I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many wonderful things about the Corsi Rosenthal box. I mean, it's so efficient. It is so simple to make. It is so affordable. And what I was highlighting in the post that you're referring to is just how environmentally friendly they are. When you look at all of the resources that probably go into building a commercial HEPA unit compared to a Corsi Rosenthal box, you literally take the box fan and you use the box that the box fan comes in, and so you're literally like reusing the packing material, and it's all, and then whatever waste you do have, it's all recyclable. And so we had an entire like U-Haul truck full of recyclable. We built over 600, over 500 units over, 2 weekends here at my house in San Diego. And we have less than one like standard kitchen size trash bag full of actual trash. Everything else was recyclable. And we provided clean air for thousands and thousands of people. It's just really remarkable.
Yeah, one can of trash. And then you showed one, like one of the smaller U-Haul trucks, kind of just the wrap, like
Hmm.
whatever the packaging or whatever the
Yeah.
tape stuff, right? But all
Hmm.
that was the recyclable stuff, and it's just amazing.
Yeah.
So well done. So did you ever, I mean, did you, I guess if you were delivering them, you
Yeah.
met people who were going through the wildfires themselves?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I remember one moment we were right around the corner from the Pasadena evacuation center at the Pasadena Convention Center, and there were people just like walking on the streets, just like where can we go to get help? And we had some clothes there. We gave them some clothes, and then we pointed them to the convention center for evacuations. One of my favorite stories is someone reached out to me on Twitter DMs saying, "Hey, I live in LA. We have evacuated from the fires. We're here in San Diego, and while we're waiting, we're staying down here, but we really want to help. Can we come over and help build CR boxes to give back to our community up in LA?" And I was like, "Are you sure? Like, don't you want to just like relax and you're like healed from the trauma?" And they're like, "No, we want to come." And so I let them come over and help build. And it turns out that it was a mom who I had actually met on Zoom before, who had requested a grant from the Corsi Rosenthal Foundation for Sierra boxes for her kids' school. And we had already given them a grant, and now here she was having a full circle moment with us, helping build to give back to LA. So
Oh,
just like
that's amazing.
yeah, lots of beautiful moments. And the people, all of the orgs in LA that we met up with, it was really beautiful. All the work that they were doing. They were, because we met several of them at one dumping station, one location. And then they were like, "Who are you with? Who are you with? Who are you dispersing to? How do you?" And then they started exchanging information with each other. So it was nice
Mm.
to be able to help bring some of these orgs together who are on the ground doing such important work and help them be more efficient and collaborate with each other too.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think I don't know how everybody else here feels, but I know a few people said this. The seeing, people like yourselves doing all the Corsi Rosenthal boxes, hearing about the different mask blocks that stepped in and, provided masks to people. I mean, we're the people who have been trying to get this going for years now,
Mm.
um, and often mocked, uh, called, paranoid, wanting to bubble wrap your kids from breathing air, uh, so many people belittled sometimes for it, or just disrespected, or just dismissed for the things you're trying to do out of your mask block or whatever.
Yeah,
Um, Coming to the rescue for many people, I hope, I saw someone in the chat say something, but you had done some sort of, TV interviews and things. I hope people are cluing into this being something that they can use ongoing, and that will maybe at least in one area like there, where people hopefully will have a little bit more respect for when they do see people out, trying to help people more with masks and cleaning air and that kind of thing. I'm hoping. Do you think that there's a chance that this
exactly.
will? Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's the hope. The hope was like, well, it was two main goals. One is to provide immediate relief, of
Of course.
course,
Yeah, yeah.
because
Step one.
Kim can tell us a lot more about how horrendous the hazard is of the air that they're breathing up there. But two is also to just bring greater awareness to the impact of air on our health. And now they have one. Now they have supplies to have one. And we made sure, like, my kids designed a tiny little piece of paper with some basic facts about how to use it and how to change it and different things like that we
Yeah, I
taped on
love that.
one. Yeah, and so we just wanted it to be like an education opportunity as well as providing immediate relief.
Yeah, it's fabulous. You know the filters you use? Did they have a QR code on them or something?
They had a Bluetooth sensor on them.
Okay, so what does that do?
Oh my gosh, I wish I could speak more to this. Here's what so
Even
it connects
basically.
to it connects to your to like a whatever, a 3M app on your phone, and it will notify you when you need to replace the filter.
Wow.
And I haven't done any like studies or research on it, but what we assume is that it's probably just measuring pressure drop.
Okay.
Um, and Kim, feel free to jump in if you have any other like guesses or hypotheses on that. But it just helps people know when it should be replaced, which is pretty cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, it's very cool. Christine,
Yeah.
have you seen those kind of filters with that kind of a sensor on it?
Just read about them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah.
I've seen them here.
Yeah, they're
I'm
the fanciest ones. They're like the fanciest ones that 3M makes, and they were just really generous to donate them. So we're really grateful
Awesome.
for them. And all like in Joaquin up in LA,
Oh
and
yeah, that's
so,
right.
like Clean Air LA, Mask LA, Mask Block LA, all of these organizations, we sent a bunch of supplies to him so he could be building as well as I was building here. And over the course of 2 weekends, the foundation donated over 1,100 CR boxes.
Amazing.
wow.
So, is the need has it dissipated now? Have you done sort of what you think you could do for people, or is it ongoing?
Well, I have more filters arriving tomorrow.
Oh, so yes. Oh, do you have any more volunteers arriving tomorrow is the question.
I don't know. I mean, the situation is just always evolving, right? Because, like Kim was saying, now there's like a horrible air quality situation with that. Um, well, gosh, what's it called? Moss, the lithium battery or
Oh,
whatever.
yes. Yeah.
Moss Landing.
Yeah,
Moss
Moss
Landing.
Landing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now we also have a pretty big fire here in San Diego down at the border. And so there's a need here, there's a need in LA. So all I know is that the filters are coming. I'm working with some of our local organizations here in San Diego, keeping in touch with LA. And it's just we're gonna have to make some hard decisions as to where we go next.
Yeah.
But the
You know what I would love to
foundation,
see in this case is
yeah,
to see like a a billboard in a very prominent position going, did you see have you seen these? Keep
yeah.
using them, or have you seen these? They help with this,
Mhm.
this case, that like just to like so people can't forget their use, right?
Yeah. What I want to see is I want to see Dr. Prather on the news in LA talking about how bad the air is.
Yes.
And then the camera pans to me and I can do a quick demo of a build and be like, here's what
Look how easy
here's
it
what you can
is.
do.
Everybody has duct tape,
I
right?
know.
Come
Because
on.
like we want to give, but the foundation, like we're a new foundation, we are very slim in our funding.
For
So
sure.
we're limited in those resources. If anyone has links to large donors, feel free to
Yeah, I was
send
going
them
to say there's no
away.
reason why someone else can't come in and
Yeah, yeah. But
donate.
ultimately, right, we want to teach people how to fish. We want to
Sure.
teach people how to do this themselves too. So, and it's so easy that people can do this and it's, pretty affordable,
Oh, it's so
relatively speaking.
amazing. Thank you so much. I think if it's okay, Christine, I was going to bring Kim in. I really was curious to learn more because I've seen one or two of your posts, Kim, about the quality of the air, excuse me, the quality of the air, of course, during the wildfires. But for those of us who've been involved just on a very basic level about improving air quality, there's a lot more to what they're breathing in than just what we think about CO2 and all these other things, right? So can you speak a little bit to what you know is in the air that people really need to pay attention to in wildfire areas?
Yeah, this is the question of the day. Because it's more than there are more than wildfires. And I was just talking to Rhina McIntyre, who's a biosecurity expert. You might have seen her name. She wrote the book Dark Winter during
Yes,
COVID.
I would love to have
And
her
so
on here sometime.
she's going to come. I just invited her to San Diego. She'll be here on April 17th because we're
Oh,
having
wait
this
a
big
minute. Wait a minute. Please give us an intro then?
I can. Yeah, I was on the phone with her for like an hour and a half yesterday. Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah,
Friends
So
with benefits.
she and I were she and I were bemoaning the fact what something that we're working on in our Airborne Institute is this what we're calling what's being called emerging chemical contaminants. And so it sounds like a fancy name, but it basically just means that because of humans, we're just putting so much more stuff in the air, different stuff than any of us were prepared to deal with. And so what's happening in these fires, what we have some understanding of what like a wildfire, like in a forest, does to health. What we don't know and what these new fires are, in the case of Palisades, LA, and the Moss Landing fire, which was batteries, 100,000 batteries. When you burn those kinds of things, what we're calling these new fires is they're not in a forest. They're in like these fires in Palisades were like literally a firestorm, 100-mile-an-hour winds and a relative humidity, like dry air. The, everything, it was burning was dry. It was just this crazy combination that probably has never happened at the same time. And so it just incinerated everything. There's these things that people use to like burn like metals away. They're called blast furnaces, and they put pulses of oxygen on them to like literally incinerate steel. And that's what happened in these fires. And so all of that stuff, during a normal fire, whatever you want to say, a normal hot fire, these are ultra hot fires. All that stuff got like, there was places where there was just nothing left. I talked to people who were saying, you go through a neighborhood and normally you'd see rubble and pieces of stuff sort of partially burned. No, there was no partial burning. Everything got incinerated. And guess where it went? Into the air where people
Right.
were breathing it. And so it was more than the complicated part that I really am still kind of struggling with answering for people. And I'm still getting questions about is I'm a particle, I study aerosol particles, the smoke, the soot, the stuff you can see, the haze you can see. And so we know how to filter that. And that's what Liesl was working on. The filters that were being developed were all for the smoke, which is super important because smoke was so prevalent and it's what you see, it's what you feel, it's what you smell. So that was one thing. But the weird part about these fires was they also released all these other toxic gases. And that is getting to be the hard part. Like it is literally thousands. I'm not kidding, like thousands of different compounds, all with different levels of toxicity. And like, what do you do about them? The Corsi Rosenthal boxes will knock some of it back, tiny bit. Filters on your face, masks on your face will knock some of it back. Like there's things, and you can actually wear respirators that are equipped with these, they call them carbon cartridges, and you can make the Corsi Rosenthal boxes and add an extra layer of filtration to take out these their carbon filters. So there's things you can do, but the gases actually are really much harder to remove. And what was confusing during these fires confused me. Everybody was looking, the winds were blowing smoke out to sea because they were Santa Ana. So they were pushing everything off the coast. So, like, here we are in the middle of this fire. We know the air is bad, but the smoke is gone. So the air looks beautiful. You look at what they call the air quality index,
Yeah.
and it was zero. It was like perfect. Air is healthy. And we're going, nope, air's not healthy because these gases are there, right? So it was kind of a nightmare. And I
Yeah.
mean, we're still struggling. And the problem I have, honestly, is and what I'm facing and what we're starting to do more of in my research group is that public health, I'm learning, has sort of, for whatever reason, decided to put their head in the sand. And you would think they'd be out there measuring what those gases are. You'd think they'd be out there trying to find the particles in the ash and see what's there to protect people. That is not what they've been doing. They don't, they won't. And they actually make statements, especially with the Moss Landing fire, they refuse. And and so why?
Mm.
And I think there's a pretty good answer. It's sad, but the more I understand about public health, the more it makes sense to me. They will not look because if they find toxin A, B, C, D, whatever they are, and they know that it's there,
Yeah.
then they have to do something about it.
Right.
And if they don't, then they're responsible to the health effects down the line. So in all these disasters, this is a 9/11. You heard about the fire, the first responders at 9/11 that got sick
Yes.
years later.
Yeah.
Now this is happening in Hawaii after the Maui fires. Those
Mhm.
people are sick a year later. So these are things like we just need to be proactive and help people, not just say, oh, see nothing, say nothing, it'll just go away. It doesn't. And so I don't want to scare people, but I kept trying to help people figure out what masks, respirators, filters they should have. Because we're in a different world right now. And back to Rhina, she's like, we're used to bushfires in Australia
Mm.
and we're used to forest fires in California, but these are what we're now calling urban fires
Mm.
because the world has gotten so hot from climate change. Now entire cities are going to be on fire. And guess what? The stuff that's in the air depends on what you're burning. And so when you start to burn a city versus forest, you get
Yes.
obviously very different stuff. So that's where we are. We're trying to understand it. We're trying to help people, um, you know, as best we can. And, we're becoming like kind of the crisis response group that we will just go there. We're just going there. We're collecting samples. We're helping people in LA collect samples. We're asking for ash samples. We'll analyze what's in the ash in their backyard, in their soil, in their garden. We're measuring it because one of the things I've learned from my crazy US Mexico situation, if you measure it, they're not going to love you.
Right.
No one's going to love, like the people, the public health people especially aren't going to love you, but I don't care. Once I say I see X, and this is what people are being exposed to, they have to do something. And so that's our approach right now, which is kind of sad, but it's what we can do right now to help people.
So it's thank you for that. That's very actually helpful. And I do remember seeing some people posting like, oh my gosh, people are just celebrating how fresh and clean it looks outside. And I remember either you or someone else had put like, no, no, it's not. Like, which is again, well, I do want to give you some credit for even feeling positive enough about public health that you thought their heads were out of the sand at all. I feel like they didn't put them in the sand. I'm guessing that the public health, their heads are still in the sand because this reaction is exactly right I remember us discussing in our original space where we had you on, and that how you got pulled in to trying to help at the start of the pandemic. And some people in public health of course are always trying, but the overarching sort of umbrella of public health seems to have failed in multiple places across the planet when it comes to the COVID pandemic. And so what you're describing now about this just sounds like what we've been seeing, doesn't it?
It's the same. And I've learned not to take it personally. And I've learned to just push forward, and help people. And like the community here, they appreciate like beyond belief. We gave them a voice and we'll just keep doing that. I see someone in the chat. I think Metter has actually made comments. I think he's might be one of the people, he or she, I'm not sure, Metter. Is a person that's written to me and asked about UCLA and Caltech. I just got a message from Caltech JPL. They are collecting the samples. I have been helping them coordinate, like, because they didn't know what to do. Like, they're scientists, they want to help. That's what we do, but they didn't know how to come together and how to coordinate with the community. And so I've been helping, like, just get going. We can send samplers up there. I can tell you what samplers to use. And so yeah, there's a everybody, anytime there's a disaster like this at different universities, especially, they want to help. And JPL really wants to help. And so they're all trying. And so people have, I'm trying to help coordinate and connect the dots. One of the positive things that I've learned from dealing with COVID has been how to engage the community, right? We're scientists, but probably one of the best things I maybe have brought to the table is an ability I've learned how to connect. The community can be incredibly helpful. So, for example, in the measurements we're making down at the border, we have our instruments in people's houses, on their balconies, on their roofs. They're looking at the numbers. We've engaged the community to help. We have them collect samples for us. When they see funny things, when they smell funny things, they tell us. It's really useful. So, to the point of LA. like there's ash everywhere, and the good thing that happened was it rained. We finally got rain. We had no rain. There's a tenth of an inch since July, 1/10 of an inch. And so that was part of the problem. But finally, a few days ago, it really poured, and that helped. However, that is all the soil and the ash and stuff is still not great. So they're gonna have to figure out how to clean all that out. So we're encouraging people to collect samples, and we're trying to help get the analysis done to figure out what is there. Again, back to what are in these community gardens. One of my niece lives in LA, and their little kid's school has a garden, and they're like, there's a layer of ash in our garden. That ash is layered like tons of metals. Should we be eating the
Oh,
beans?
yeah.
Probably not, right? So there's all these issues that nobody knows what to do. And so we're trying to just not freak people out, but just help people be safe.
Yeah, I mean, unless except for the fact that we're speaking to you, I can imagine if I was one of those community members, I would have very little to know to even ask that question about a few things, right? And so you're right. It's so crucial that you are still going out there despite, and probably because you know how it can be if you let public health take the lead. So grateful for you to get out there. I think it's amazing that the community members are embracing you being there and helping. I think it's nice for them. It's almost like they're cutting through all the red tape, right? They're actually just getting the information straight from the person who's searching it out, and that's probably really refreshing for people.
Yeah, I hope so. It's just you do what you can, to help. And through this, I'll say that Liesl and I finally met. Like
Yes,
what, Liesl? Yeah, we did.
Yay!
that's
She
so
was in my
nice.
she was in my driveway. So my husband has a special little cutter for the shrouds,
Oh,
and
that's right, Lisa. You were asking about the most efficient way to cut through all those, remember? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
great.
then you think about all the things that Kim is talking about that she's involved in and doing, and the fact that she like made time and roped in her wonderful husband to help like cut a bunch of cardboard is just really speaks to your character, Kim. And it was just such a delight to finally be able to meet you and that you guys would support the efforts as a family. Thank you so much.
no, well, thank you. You're a breath of fresh air. And I will say one of the things we did, remember, Lisa, we were talking about the waste. So when you punch out, they're like donut holes, right? So when you punch out that you have to make the shroud, this 15-inch hole, and it's part of the thing that stops the fan, that helps the airflow be better, more efficient. And so you end up with this circle out of the box, of course, the Rosenthal box, but basically if that's what you tape on the face to make them, say airflow better. And so we ended up with all these 15-inch circles. What do you do with them? Well, my husband found the teacher at our kids are grown now, but their former school, and they were happy as clams to have 500 15-inch circles, because guess what they went to? Art class.
Yeah.
They're thrilled. So we found that was a big last piece that was not being, sort of recycled, right? And so yeah, arts appreciate 15-inch circles. So yeah.
That's hilarious. I noticed someone in the chat, Elizabeth said, when Kim Prather calls you a breath of fresh air, it really means something.
Yeah, because most air is not very fresh in my experience.
That's true. So you're the bomb, Lisa. That's so funny. Christine, did you have anything you want to ask about the wildfires sort of whole piece of things, or do you want to move on a little?
As I was listening, I was thinking to myself, it's going to be a long time before they fully realize the fallout of some of these disasters. Like, look how long after 9/11 happened, how many years later people were still being made sick. And that was like one fairly contained area, although it was a pretty big building. But you see all those firefighters out there, all those wildfires, all those people, all those they brought in prisoners, didn't they? To do firefighting as well. What about exposure to them? Like, I wonder sometimes about the long-term effect for people in this, and I don't think a lot of that will be realized for a long time.
No, I am, because of Rhina, I am trying to connect I will be connecting with the people in the Maui fires because they're a year, I don't remember how far long ago they were, but they're ahead of us by quite a bit, and they're seeing that these outcomes. That was also an urban fire. And so I'm trying to, sort of see what they did, how they're dealing with it, what's happened to people there, so that people here will, have some idea in this case of what to expect. It'd be better to be able to, one of the things we're working on is an air model. Um, Again, this is back with Rhina. Our sort of dream project is to map climatology and airflow and, where things are flowing and where hot spots are so we can actually not after the fact, but before the fact, warn people, you are in a spot that is just super, has a potential to burn and or what, whatever flood, whatever the disaster of the day is. And you better have, this kind of filter on hand, this kind of mask on hand, so that we can warn people before rather than after. That is
Right,
what we're pushing on right now.
right.
And that's why Rhina's going to come here because we're going to be sort of putting this together as a big project to help people around the world. Yeah.
Hmm.
Kim, something that I learned from you the other day that was really helpful for me is that other people might be appreciate is just explaining to us how the like air quality apps that people use, how they only measures those six different
Oh, yeah.
things and how that doesn't always capture the complete picture of what's going on.
Yeah, so you can go online in your area and you can look up air quality AQI, air quality index. And at least in the United States, it's pretty much what everybody measures, but that's just measuring like that was designed like this. I think the last time it was touched was like in the 90s. And
Right.
it's just at that time it was just pollutants that we knew about that were common, like ozone, carbon monoxide, particulate matter, PM, we call it PM. So it's like six different pollutants. It's called the National Ambient Air Quality Standard in the US. It's a NAC standard. And that's what it's based on. And all these other things I'm talking about, all these other gases that are coming out, fires or particles that are coming out. Well, particles it'll still pick up. The gases, I mentioned there's thousands of different toxic gases coming out. None of those are regulated. Nobody quite knows like which ones they know sort of the toxicity of some of these and which ones you probably don't want to be breathing. But again, the warning that you see. So what the thing that happened to Liesl's point, during the fires, the air quality index I mean, the air looked beautiful. The air quality index looked beautiful. Everything looked healthy. Yet people were like, my lungs are burning, my eyes are watering. What the heck? And it was because of these other gases that are completely invisible. They're not being measured and they're not regulated. And so that is what I am now like, I'm literally working on a paper that I'm perspective to kind of try and launch this into a high impact journal, which means it'll make the news and people will start to think about it because there has to be pressure on the reality that this is where we're going. This is not, it used to be like we'd have a fire like this once every 20, 30, 40 years. So, yeah, it didn't go so well. Or 9/11, right? Not common, just happens once in a while. So let's not worry. As you can see, it is becoming very common. We had so many fires. Things were lighting up on fire everywhere down here during this. This is not going away, sadly. So we've got to start thinking about the future of how we address these things to not mislead the public because people were being told multiple things. Air is really unhealthy. And they're looking outside and they're going, it's beautiful. Air quality index says it's beautiful, but it's not. And so, but how unhealthy? What do I do? What do I, all these things, they're all fixable if people
Yeah.
would just acknowledge it. But it's back to the fixable problem and acknowledging that it's a problem and then helping people understand because you can filter these gases. You can filter the gases. Particles turn out to be even easier to filter, honestly. But yeah, to Liesl's question, I mean, it's like, yeah, these gases just are really difficult. A lot of them are really difficult to remove. They're still there. They're still there. And as the flames have gone down, things are, smoldering now.
Mm.
Um, People are doing the removal all of that ash and stuff is still degassing. There's still like in your home, there are gases coming out of a lot of material all the time. And again, people just haven't paid attention to these things. So we're trying
Kim,
to we're trying to get there.
I want to ask you a question. Um, how far will those particles travel? Like, I'm assuming, like, would they get caught in the wind? Like, that's in
Oh yeah.
that area. Like, do we know how far those, like, there's readings on those, on that exposure? Like, in
Oh
terms of
yeah, yeah.
distance?
All those particles, like we're how far? 60, no, 100 miles? No, drive the crow. So probably 60 miles as the crow flies. So direct line, San Diego is 60 miles. We got their smoke. We got had
Okay.
beautiful Liesl, you saw we had beautiful sunsets, right? That's the fire
Yeah.
smoke. They travel miles and miles. Now, the good news is they get diluted over distance. That's good, but there's still smoke. Like we have sensors across San Diego now as part of our measurements, and those just lit up. They got there. It took a couple days before we actually started seeing, detectable levels. But yeah, we definitely saw the smoke from LA, and it travels over really long distance. To say many, tens of miles, hundreds of miles, where it's still detectable. You can still see it. You can't smell it, but you can see it.
Right. Okay. I've been in Santiago in Chile and seen Santiago is one of the dirtiest cities in the world. And it's because that air gets trapped, the pollution gets trapped between the mountains and it can't go high enough to move past it. Um, I don't know what it is with people. They think if you can't see it, it's all good. Like, oh no, it's okay. Don't worry, we can't see it. It's okay. You can't see it. What if you can't see it, it'll kill you.
Yeah, you know
That's
what I
my
often,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's true. Go ahead. No, that's the problem, is that if you don't see it, you think it's not there. That's the problem with
right.
air.
Yeah, it's the problem when we started off all of these things with COVID, right? Is that it eventually can be visible in certain ways, but it wasn't like, measles or something that you would see spots all over someone if they had it or right. So it was very easy to go, and we know the high number of asymptomatic cases. So you'd be like, oh, well, they seem fine. Right. Like, so yeah, whenever it's invisible, it seems a problem. I know when I've been trying to just like get someone, let's say in my circle, to contemplate, paying attention to indoor air or whatever, I will often use, well, how we are mandated to have CO monitors in our homes, and that's an invisible thing that in high levels, we get a warning, and then we either, we evacuate the space or we air it out or whatever, because we don't want to be harmed by this invisible, odorless, colorless thing, right? And so it's not an absurd idea that there just happens to be a couple of other things that are like that. We just aren't mandated to measure those yet, but there are ways to measure them, and you can choose to right now. And maybe someday, CO2 monitors, et cetera, and all the other ones that would, maybe measure the things you're talking about, Kim, maybe they'll become something that's more common if we can get people to see it in terms that they understand, like a CO monitor, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah, you just made me remember one really horrible part about all this is that,
You're
oh,
welcome.
another one. Sorry. No, but it's the balance because right during COVID, we're telling people open your windows, have
Right.
ventilation, drop your CO2 levels. During the
Right.
smoke and the fires, we're saying close, lock, seal your doors and windows
Yeah,
and get inside. And so they were keeping kids inside in classrooms with zero ventilation, no filtration, by the way,
yeah,
right? And so it's like, okay, what do I do? I want good ventilation because of COVID or respiratory
yeah,
disease, but I want to seal my windows and doors because of smoke.
yeah.
They're conflicting, right? And people didn't
Right.
know what to do. It's really bad,
I
bad
can understand.
combination.
I can understand why people are so confused. They've been left with such little information in the first place. Like I know with Ontario School Safety, we're often trying to say, like we've often tried to say, the quality of the air outdoors impacts the quality of the air inside because as we have more climate events and things, we will be spending more time indoors. That means you're going to have the good systems ready already inside to deal with, the frequency of people being in there in groups and in close quarters and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a big learning curve. I'm grateful for the work you've been doing around the fires and doing what you can and making the noise that we know you've always been making, Kim. So thank you for that. I wondered if we could bring in our next guest if he's still with us. Tim, are you here? I'm gonna look for you.
Ding, ding, ding. Is anyone home?
Oh yeah, I see him. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you, Tim, in just a sec. So, and the reason is Tim is very cool, and he's a real has studied voters' brains for a long time, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about the things we're seeing politically, and with public health, just the perspectives people are taking and the mindsets around stuff. But I know that I wanted to bring him in now because I know that there are a couple of topics that I thought he could speak to that would probably be linked to things that both Liesl and Kim, have witnessed and seen in the different things that they're doing from, Liesl and, the work that you've been doing in your schools and, where you're at now, what's going on. And, Kim, with you doing research and seeing the cutbacks to research funding, the amount of, pulling from the World Health Organization and the quieting of the CDC, all those things. I imagine that these things are stuff that you're thinking about quite a bit when you're trying not to, like you said, get caught in the chaos of everything that's coming out. So I just thought if we could, we'll bring Tim in because I wanted to bring up some of those topics and see what he had to say because he's got thoughts. So Tim Abray, Dr. Tim Abray now, since the last time we had him on, has been a communications policy strategy leader for 3 decades. And he's only 30, working at the intersection of the public and private sectors. He has a doctorate in politics and studies the effects of political communication on voter cognition, behavior, and decision-making. He began his career as a radio news reporter and anchor and continues to draw on those early experiences in his ongoing professional work with diverse organizations and publics. During election periods, he is a frequent commentator on election campaigns, political communication, and democracy. And he's very much a go-to for me when I'm reading something. I'm like, Tim, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think? Like, because he always gives such a great perspective, something that I might not think of, myself, but certainly gives me more to think about often. So welcome, Tim. You can come in and say hello. If
Do
he's
we
awake.
have Lithgow? Is he with us?
I think so. Let me check. So you can unmute Tim.
How about
Yep.
now?
There is.
There we go.
Hello.
We have
Oh,
Lithgow.
there you go. All
There's
right.
that
No,
radio
Abray.
voice. Your
I'm
radio
so-
voice. I love it.
yeah, had the double mute on, unfortunately, but there you go. Now
What's
I'm
the
now I'm
double
here.
mute?
My earbuds have a mute on them as well, so the
Oh,
microphone
perfect.
was off, but the microphone on the earbuds was off too, just to make
Okay.
sure I didn't accidentally start shrieking into the microphone while listening about all the problems we're having around idiotic politicians not understanding the collective action problems we're
Yeah.
facing, which
Yeah.
My
yeah,
God.
which is
Think the
what
world has lost its mind.
I am so incredibly grateful for people like Liesl and Kim because I mean that's where the real work is being done, and it is just appalling how much effort has to go into just simply activating mechanisms that are meant to be in place to protect all of us and to preserve the public good. Good Lord, the public good. It seems to be something we've forgotten about, and our systems are working very hard to help us forget about them entirely. So it's really lovely to hear from people on the ground getting important things done despite the challenges.
Kim and Lisa, do you know Tim? Have you ever heard him in one of our spaces before?
I haven't. It's so nice to meet you, Tim.
He's
Nice to meet you
he's a
too.
fellow Canadian.
Oh, okay.
I could tell by the accent. Yes.
Oh, is that
Yes.
right? Oh, isn't that
And we
funny?
didn't, and then he mentioned the political part. I'm going to pretend like I'm from Canada pretty soon.
Get in line, sister. Get in line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
come on
Apparently,
up.
that's the
Do you
Do you have
number one
room?
Google
Do you have
search
room?
right
You have room? I mean, that's what I say when I travel. I just tell people I'm from Canada at this point.
now. I
I lived in Denmark for 3.5 years.
Ah,
Studying
Oh,
the Scandinavian school system, and we always joke, my husband and I, about like every election cycle about going back. But now it seems like if we go back, we still might end up being under rule, depending on what our
I
current
know.
leadership
I
wants.
honestly more often now I'm thinking, where can we escape to? And I'm like, there's nowhere. Like,
I know.
I don't know. I don't know where the magic place is. But anyway, so Tim, Kim, Tim, Liesl, Tim, Liesl. There you go.
Oh
Now you're all
man, that's a
introduced.
mouthful, MJ.
That was
that's a
pretty good though.
lot.
I thought I did
Well
my
done.
cheek
Oh,
exercise, my radio stuff, Tim. Listen, the one thing I know that we could talk about really quickly is my little comment when I said, "Oh, but I saw today that RFK Jr. has committed to funding long COVID." And I knew what was already going on in your head, Tim. But many people,
Yeah.
of course, are like, "Yeah, right, okay," like as if we're going to see that happen. So, what do you want to say about that? What is it that people are supposed to do? Because we know that people who really want RFK to be in there are going to be like, see, COVID people, he's willing to do
Yeah.
things. And what do we probably know?
So two things first. I apologize in advance. I have a tendency to profanity that the first two guests don't. So if I happen to swear, I apologize in advance, but it's
That's
simply
okay.
because this
Christine
shit
and
is
I will balance
irritating.
them out.
Yeah. So I did post it in the chat because I couldn't contain myself. I mean, I think we really need to listen to trusted interveners when this kind of stuff goes on. So, I mean, the fact that Carolyn Kennedy went out there and basically sold her cousin out completely should tell people something, right? This is somebody who does not generally seek out the spotlight, generally does not engage in discussions about her family, who is willing to lay out a character sketch of her cousin simply to try and protect the public good. And I think that that's a really important thing that people need to bring to these conversations constantly. Um, we are very much in the era of the con artist politician, and that has always been a thing. Like I'm not naive that way, and I've been around way too many decades. God, I wish I was 30, but I'm really not. It's let's double that up. But I mean, that's been a problem forever. But the problem is it's becoming more of an entire ethos for operation. It's not an anomaly anymore. There isn't as much of a taboo. It used to be simply that, getting caught was the thing you avoided. But if you did get caught, it was largely a death sentence in the political sphere. We used to have people resigning over implications of wrongdoing. But today, we seem to have absolutely shattered that taboo. So someone like RFK can see that as he can now see a path to the kinds of power that 20, 30, 40 years ago would have been unimaginable for someone like him, because checks and balances would have kicked in and people would have been too embarrassed to confirm someone like him into that kind of a position. But now we've kind of entered an arena over the last, I mean, it's been a very gradual evolution. Uh, we could get into arguments about it, but let's just say, for the sake of reference, that the shift really started happening in the 1970s, and really kicked in earnest in the 1990s, and has been kind of a uh, steady application to the gas pedal since then, driving government further and further into a corner where access to the legitimate power of government is really only accessible to people with wealth or connections. And that's not the intention of democratic pluralistic governments. They're meant to be representative of people, everyone. They're meant to be power that balances out the power of individuals, conquers the power of individuals, to make sure that the public good is protected. That's its entire purpose. Its entire purpose is to balance out private interests. But we've entered an era where someone like JFK, RFK, oh my goodness, RFK can look at what formerly were positions in public power and see them as a means of dismantling that public power and further asserting private interests. And it really is the case. And in his case, it just seems to be venal self-interest, not even particular private interests. And so we really do need to not succumb to those moments of hopeful naivete where something good comes out of an actor's mouth like that, where he says that no, of course he's going to invest in COVID research, we have to really look at that carefully and say no. I mean, he's saying that simply to give himself access to the levers of power. There's no other reason for him to say that. He is simply looking at the hurdles that he's going to have to pass to get through this confirmation hearing. And if he can do that, then it's clear sailing from there on in for him. And so we have to fight so hard uh, against that now. We cannot trust historical understandings of the way the institutions work, because the people who are now in charge of those institutions don't respect those conventions. And so we have to be as loud and consistent and public and cooperative as we possibly can to try and reassert those conventions and help regular folks who are just confused as heck to understand why it's important to reassert those conventions. Because without them, and another piece, I could go on forever, MJ. You're going to have to plunge in at some point. But there was a point raised by Kim earlier when she was talking about how you really have to waive the negative test, the terrible test results in the face of public health in order to get them to act. Well, that's symptomatic of a problem that's been developing for a few decades now. Public health was instituted many moons ago, precisely for the purpose of distancing those sorts of decisions from political actors. The whole point was to not put these sorts of decisions around how to manage the public well-being in the hands of political actors, because we knew it was going to be bad. And so we created public health agencies. Politicians created public health agencies so that they would not have to bear the load of making those decisions. They could point to someone else, they could blame someone else, and it would be someone who is insulated from being subjected to things at the ballot box. But we've totally lost that plot. We've completely lost that plot. And in most places, Canada included, for the most part, public health has now been subsumed by the political process, that they are more concerned about political perception than they are about people's lungs. And it's not helpful. So it is, we're in quite a moment. Things are really in flux right now. And I think that the problem is well-meaning, well-intentioned, kind people are going to have to get their head around the fact that we're going to have to fight like hell if we're going to not just preserve our institutions, but help them progress in a way that makes them meaningful and helpful in a completely different era.
Thank you, Tim, for that. Well, two things. I know one, when you're talking about, how things sort of started back in the 90s. Have you ever heard of, he's a Harvard political philosophy professor named Michael Sandel?
Oh, yes. Yep. Absolutely.
He was on the TVO, The Agenda, the other night, and he was fascinating to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know much about him? Like, I mean, you sound like you do.
Yeah.
Do you want me to find the link and put it in the chat?
Sure, yeah.
Oh,
Let me go
that would
see
be
if I
great.
can find the link.
Okay. It's a YouTube excerpt. So if it's Michael Sandel, Sandel.
Mm-hmm. And
Sorry,
what was
Tim.
he talking about that night?
So, really, it was Steve Paikin, who's the host for everybody else. He was asking him, well, I guess he's come out with another book, which is called Equality,
Mhm.
What It Means and Why It Matters. And then I guess his
Right.
other book was Democracy's Discontent. And the things that he talked about ended up being about, people's the inability, and I think you touched on this in one of your posts that you had put online in response to something I'd shared with you about, people's discontentment has largely been ignored for a long time, and just that political parties are not paying attention to what it is that has made people just so frustrated and all that for so long, and then they're sort of surprised by the reactions or the steps they take and who they vote for and things like that. And he also ended up sort of getting into even what he thought might have to happen for humans just to sort of get back to better humaning. And that is,
Yeah.
and that is really creating community again in ways that,
Definitely.
right? In ways like public parks and
Yeah.
creating situations where people are interacting with each other, regardless of your stance on different things, but where you have these human links with people rather than people staying in their silos separate and never seeing that other side and never interacting and just
Yeah.
creating those connections. Anyway, I honestly, I found it, I have to go back. I want to go back and listen to it because it was actually quite a lengthy time he was on speaking. And I was just, there was so much. And I was like, oh, he was really captivating. I
Yeah.
would
It's a,
happily listen to that again.
yeah, I mean, that's been a rich vein for some time. And he's a very eloquent spokesperson for, the civilizing effect of community. But the challenge I would put out to that school of thought is that it's fine and good to talk about the importance of community and the importance of building real geographic and relational bonds with people who share things in common with you. But the way in which human beings, and this speaks directly to the research that I do, that the way in which human beings actually are able to form those attachments and form those communities and capitalize on their benefits is because we build institutions around them to protect them. And for people of our vintage, we're roughly in the same territory. Those of us born in the 1960s and grew up through what arguably was the golden age of pluralistic democracy. The world had a massive, horrifying, terrifying, existential horror show through the first half of the 20th century, and it shocked most uh, developed nations into attempting to work together and to build stronger institutions to prevent that kind of horror from happening again. And the problem with our generation having grown up through that sort of golden light of that era is that we learn to take it for granted. And the truth of that is that it's an incredibly tiny blip in the history of humanity. That 30 years where everybody was focused on not fucking it all up again uh, faded quickly when people started making money again. People were healthy, lifespans were expanding. There were no, major wars between Western powers, and everybody said, "See, it's working. We can relax." And people like me would argue, you're forgetting how we got here. You're forgetting that humans are quite fragile, and our grasp on our rationality is much more fragile than we imagine. And we do rely on deep instincts much of the time that we then paper over with a very thin pate of rationality to help us explain the world to ourselves and to maintain the world as we see it should be maintained. But the problem is it's very, very fragile and easily disrupted. And the institutions are important to keep training us to behave in particular ways. And if you start letting the institutions slide, if you start letting those conventions slide, our ability to continue fostering and nurturing and advancing those communities also starts to fade. Or it starts to follow much more chaotic patterns. And that's what we're seeing now, that those institutions are being neglected, and in some cases, they're being actively torn apart. And they're being replaced with informal institutions like social media, like Facebook, like Twitter, that recreate these sorts of senses of community, but without the rigor of active, conscious, purposeful institutions guiding them, institutional thought. So the idea that we need to do things together, that public health requires concerted effort from everyone, that there are such things as public goods that need to be protected, that the market won't solve everything, and that in fact, it will create a lot more problems than it solves if it's left to its own devices. And we kind of have lost track of that. And the vulnerabilities of our own brains and our own ability to overcome massive overstimulation is starting to catch up with us. And if we don't double down on reshaping our institutions to help preserve public goods and advance public goods in this new information environment that we're living in, we're going to be in a lot of trouble, because we're going to be easily torn apart by people who simply have access to modes of communication that can reach people instantly and constantly and in myriad ways. And it's a big challenge, but I think the biggest thing we can do is what we're doing here tonight, which is we're forming our own sense of community. It's based around ideas of mutual protection and mutual aid, which has been the strength of the human species for a long time. And that efforts to have those conversations and drive us back towards a conscientious effort to build institutions that can create meaningful community again is probably the most important activity we can be involved in right now.
So Tim, I'm not necessarily going to say that you have an answer to this, but I actually agree and understand what you're saying. And I think, yes, what you said at the very beginning, which is, we have to fight like hell to retain these or to rebuild them, whatever the case may be. I see obviously the challenges, that chaos that we've even mentioned a couple of times in the midst of all of that, when they're coming at things quickly in succession, and that have such far-reaching impacts on often the people who are most vulnerable or marginalized. That chaos often puts people in the positions where they're just looking to survive, where they don't have the energy and capacity to also, fight to make things better. And I know that in a lot of cases, that's the purpose of the people who are doing that destruction. That's the purpose, to create that chaos. So, I remember seeing that quote, and you're not necessarily talking only about fascism, but I remember seeing, the slow way, or, once you get fascist in, it takes a lot longer to get them out. It's not necessarily going to be the same speed with which they arrived, So, how do people go forward while you're in the midst of it all? And try to fix it.
I would come back to where we are tonight. The real secret to all of this is creating space and time. That when you can, human beings really need space and time in order to solve problems properly. Unless something has been done many times over and over and over again, we need the space and time to think through things. The analogy I often use for people is, imagine trying to do, like, everybody has had the math problem experience. You're taking math in high school or in university. It's new. It's something you're not used to. It's incredibly challenging to your brain. And you're sitting, hopefully, in a comfortable environment, a place that makes you comfortable to work through this stuff. Now imagine trying to work through this new math problem, this new math formula, while somebody is shoving you and yelling names at you. And that's the social environment we've kind of created for ourselves, is that we're attempting to have these really complex discussions over public goods and the ways in which to solve problems, the way in which to solve collective action problems. But at the same time, we're being shoved and screamed and kicked at. And it is not an environment that's at all conducive to trying to build a society that's mutually beneficial. And the problem is, we've let the folks who have the least interest in that into the corridors of power. We've let people run amok with the levers of power, which are real. Legislation is real. Laws are real. The enforcement of laws are real. And if we let that kind of chaos reign over those basic fundamental institutions in our society, it's going to be a while before we catch our breath and get a hold of it again. And so the big thing is to start creating these spaces where people can have these conversations calmly, where we can mutually support, where we can learn from each other, where we can identify the things that need to be fixed, and then help each other come up with ways to approach those problems and apply pressure. Otherwise, we're just going to be constantly dealing with the flying rotten fruit everywhere and people shoving and kicking and yelling. And it's not helpful. And it's one of the main reasons that most of the people probably in this room have vacated X, right? Um, Twitter initially used to be a place where you could have arguments, but you could also learn a lot. Like pretty much everybody in this room are people that I have learned something from over time, talking about things I know nothing about, listening to them, learning from them. But we are in an era where expertise is denigrated, where thoughtful reflection is denigrated, and so it's going to take an awful lot of fortitude and a lot of cooperation and a lot of will to push back and create contemplative, thoughtful spaces again that help us focus on actually solving the problems we need to solve and creating institutions that are a little more impervious to the kinds of challenges that the modern communications environment presents.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
So much to think about.
It is,
Yeah,
my
right.
brain, it's not like because you didn't say anything good, it's because my brain's like,
No, I know.
No.
So I mean, the bottom line with this, and it's interesting when you talked about the business of it takes a lot longer to get a fascist out than it does to get a fascist in. Well, and the reason for that sort of truism is because nobody does it intentionally. And this is the big thing that I keep pointing out to people now, which is the problem with reasonable people is they're reasonable. And so they will want to take time and they will want to listen and they will give benefit of the doubt. And they will deny that there's any really serious problem, that this will fade, that the institutions and the way things have been are robust enough to withstand this kind of stuff. I mean, how many times have you heard this on talk shows, right? Right, where, oh no,
the fabric will not tear. The fabric
that's right.
The fabric of democracy will hold strong. And you're like,
Yeah,
fuck off with that.
and what I would say to that is that democracy is large, like the modern incarnation of democracy, pluralistic, rooted in laws, democracy is tissue thin, is not been around very long, and was an accident to begin with, and it was a power play to begin with. Because it was simply a way of wresting power from traditional birthright power and wealth and transferring some of that power into the hands of people who were discovering new ways of generating wealth but didn't have any traditional power. And the happy accident is that it gave everybody else access to it through a series of happenstances through recent history. We ended up with everybody getting some degree of say in the system. Well, we never really had time to digest that. And our brains certainly aren't up to the complexity of it without a lot of help. That we are so vulnerable to emotional impulse, vulnerable to being provoked. I mean, the social media is just one constant shove, basically. And
Oh, it's
just try and
like
think
getting
straight.
poked by
Yeah.
the dare. It's
Yeah.
getting poked by the bear nonstop, right?
Constantly. So you need to find ways to help each other get space and time to start getting back to what those basic principles on mutual aid and cooperation and what community actually is about, which is solving problems that we all have, but no one's going to make any money off of. You know, public
Well,
health
if
doesn't exist.
listen, if we were
Public,
here to make money, MJ and
yeah,
I'd have been gone a long time
right,
ago because
100%.
we're not grifting.
Exactly, no grifting
literally
here.
losing money prepping for
Yeah.
these things.
But that is the point, right?
Yeah.
And that is the point of sticky collective action problems, is that they're not really there to be made money off of. But we have so programmed ourselves to think that everything needs to be profit oriented over the
Or an
last 40
opportunity,
years.
right? There's an
Yeah.
opportunity. Like I have I think for me, I've known the grift has been around for a long time, but
Yeah.
I got a different view of the grift during the convoy in Ottawa when I saw that sort of back channel, 4chan Reddit crap where people were running 24/7 live feed, and you could hear the little cash registers of the coffee cups just cha-chinging, right?
Yep.
And people were like raking in hundreds upon hundreds of dollars a day doing that. And that kind of made me really dial into what a low grade, low bar bunch of four flush and sack of shit grifters these people are.
Yeah,
Well, what can I say? I mean, Jane Godley's not the only one who can use those words at times either.
I
Okay.
think you only had 12 descriptors in there this time.
I'm just, but you know what, Tim? Here's something that's really kind of worrying me these days. I saw kind of a funny little cartoon, a political cartoon of kind of like a warehouse of people, and they were typing furiously, all these people, and they're like making sure that they got notes. And I started to think about what we're seeing happening in the US, how the guardrails are off and the
Yeah.
checks and balances are falling to the side. I really worry about the history and who's protecting the documents and like the archives. Like, am I being a weirdo worrying about public libraries and archives and the places that protect public information? Because it just appears to me that some people would just be quite happy to do away with history altogether.
Well, yeah, I mean, always. I mean, that is the history of authoritarian and totalitarian impulses, is the way you control the outcome is by narrowing the options, right? And I mean, Trump is probably the most ludicrous example of this, that he basically gives you the choice of the handshake or the brick to the head. And those are the only two choices. And so narrowing the choices as much as you possibly can is always going to be in that playbook. So no, you're not wrong. But one of the benefits of this crazy information environment we've created is that there's incredible redundancy in information everywhere. So I mean, there are things to be concerned about, absolutely. Ease of access, a breadth of material that you have access to, the digital tools that make it possible to reach a whole lot of stuff all at once, also make it possible to restrict access to a whole lot of things all at once. So there's no question there's issues there. Absolutely. But to me, that's almost uh, further down the road. There's an awful lot of people with libraries and books and shared knowledge who are willing to continue sharing it. The bigger issue for me in the short term will be about attempting to break through the crazy, crazy maelstrom of information we're dealing with every day to try and focus people on what the really key core problems are, policy problems are that we have, that we need to focus on resolving. That it's not simply good enough to wish them away or to obliterate them by eliminating funding. The problems will persist and we will need to do something about them. But the problem with the environment we're in now, like our brains just aren't equipped to deal with it. Again, another analogy I use often is that back in the day, we used to drip information at people like, a few drops of water to their forehead or every day, right? But now we're living in a world where it's a constant monsoon. And
Mm.
so trying to drive information in a coherent way using old channels and expecting it to work the way it used to is just not going to happen, because people aren't going to be able to tell the difference between your drips and the rest of the raindrops. It's very difficult to do that. And so what you need to do is start paying, and this brings me full circle to where I started with this. It brings us back to, you need to create institutions to give people shelter from that rainstorm, to focus on the issues that are at hand, to focus on the problems we have. And there was a bit of a moment about 20 years ago, and they're still around, but it had a particular moment about 20 years ago where there was growing interest in things like citizens' assemblies. And that's where you pull together a random selection of people that are populationally representative, and get them to talk about, learn about, and then brainstorm solutions to collective action problems. And so the ones we're probably most familiar with in the Canadian context are things like citizens' assemblies to decide on reshaping electoral systems. We used a citizens' assembly to decide who would go on the last version of the $10 bill that was issued. You know, they're used all the time, but one of the ways, so that's an example of how an institution can be used to create shelter for a group of people to focus on a particular problem and bring solutions to that problem forward. Because that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen on your Instagram feed. There's just too much going on. There is too much interference. There is too much deliberate provocation. There are too many bad actors in there, and it doesn't take very many, but there are too many bad actors in there trying to disrupt constructive conversation. And so again, I keep coming back to this, but the thing that got us out of the gutters was building robust, meaningful, effective institutions. And those institutions are now kind of solidly outdated, and we need to work much harder at creating institutions that can reproduce the conditions where human beings can make good, collaborative, collective decisions in the common interest.
If I can, I just want to call attention just prior to sort of responding that to some of the comments in the chat, which are really interesting. I think this was back when we were talking about, you know, what do people do when we're surrounded by the chaos and people are just trying to kind of make it, right? Survive. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Tanya Powers had put around 10 o'clock, 10:01, and possible actions to consider. So if people want to check that out, it's got a whole list of things that people can do if they're looking just how to, you know, contact Social Security Disability Office, et cetera. I'm assuming that's all in the States. Social Security Administration offices, the Department of Justice, seeking legal help, that kind of thing. So if people want to check that out. There was
And I
also,
put the link up. I put the TVO link.
oh yes, thank you so much. And Tony Culinary, who may be gone already, but they were sharing some positive news before they were logging off, that the Illinois, which I had read earlier, the Illinois school air quality legislation is being pushed hard right now in the House and Senate. So if anyone's interested, connect with their Facebook group. All public schools would get a high quality ventilation assessment and repaired windows as needed. All teachers would get an IEQ monitor, air cleaner, and good educational materials, etc. It's got a lot of support apparently, and it was created with the guidance of Ashray, which we know, or at least with the past president of Ashray. So anyway, things like that are really helpful that people are putting in the chat. Thanks so much for that. I was wondering, Kim, if you don't mind speaking to something that I know you posted about recently, but it is really about, you know, the systems that Tim has talked about and that we mentioned earlier too. And you put a post out about how different science and research, how different the landscape is now. And I wondered if you sort of talk about, I guess, sort of when you started in that, what it was like and what you're seeing it become, and then what your feelings are with the recent, you know, things going on in politics around science research and funding.
Yeah, I got to remember my post. It was one of my provocative posts at the time. I was
I'll see if I can
frustrated
find
about.
it.
I have to remember the context of why I even said it, but I think I know what I was thinking. I was talking about when we started, and it's really hard to teach students this. You know, I've had, I don't know, I think I've had over 50 PhD students now, and it's just changed our job, what we train them to do. The biggest thing one of the biggest things that's changed is, you know, when when we started, we all were taught, you make a hypothesis in science, you know, you say, I think this is what's going to happen. And then you go test that hypothesis. And, you know, it turns out that the more cutting edge you are, the more chance that your hypothesis is going to be wrong. And quite honestly, that has inspired me my entire career, is to be, quote, wrong, because I wasn't really wrong. We just discovered something, went against the grain of what everybody believes. So COVID is airborne, like that kind of stuff, where you look at things completely different, and you test things and you prove that what people have said. Just because they've said it for 100 years doesn't make it right. And so I've forever taught my students to be fearless and to try and, just carry that approach. But what now has happened is now it's like, if you're quote wrong, in other words, you discovered something new, then people in largely, honestly, it's pitched from the mainstream media. People will just say, well, you were wrong. You said this was going to happen and that happened. So therefore, they use it to like slash your credibility. And it gets worse when you're on the edge of affecting, public health, or, you know what I mean? Like it gets brutal. And that has just changed to where people will now, I'm watching good people, retreat and not do that cutting edge research, not make those fearless, you know, I still do, we still do. But it's harder and harder to have it like sort of thrown back, at you and used against you to, again, in the case of public health, the first thing that happened to me when we exposed this crisis down at the border was they came after my data and tried to smear that. And when that didn't work, then they tried to smear me. And that didn't work eventually. But, it all takes its toll. It's just a crazy time where scientists are just, quite honestly, we're under attack when we're just trying to help. And it gets old. It gets tiring after a while. So I think I don't remember exactly what my post was, but that's the root of how things have evolved since I've been doing this.
Thank you so much, Kim. I don't know, Tim or Liesl, if you have anything to say about what Kim was mentioning, or if you've seen it, Liesl, in some version in education, like where you're working.
Yeah, yeah, tell me about, yeah, 100. That's the story of my academic life. Like I was a practitioner, right, for a very long time in public policy and communication, and working at that spot where the private sector meets government. But I was usually working on the public policy side of it, trying to help um, policymakers shape their pitches so that they would be more palatable to politicians and private sector actors, right? So trying to preserve the policy, but get it sold in a way that would allow it room to breathe. Um, and in the course of doing that over, 25 years, I started to see such a massive shift in the way in which that dynamic was happening. Increasing skepticism, increasing lack of respect for expertise and knowledge, increasing lack of willingness to sit and learn. That's what drove me actually to go back to academia and pursue the research, because I was trying to figure out how it was that this massive shift in that dynamic was happening. And so the irony of that is, I mean, I went back with full naive intentions to get at the heart of that problem, and ran into exactly in a different form, but exactly the kind of problem that Kim is talking about, which is just a deep skepticism of anything that upsets the balance now. That if you say or do anything that violates people's preconceived notions about the world or the way things have been represented before, it verges on witch hunt. Like it verges on, oh my God, how dare you challenge our preconceived notions about things. And I can't even imagine what it's like on the ground for someone who's working in the hard sciences, like Kimberly, and who's working in
Yeah.
public advocacy and education like Liesl.
Yeah, witch hunt. I mean, it's a personal attack, like nothing you've ever felt. And like, I honestly, I first was kind of like, I don't know. It's upsetting when you think you're doing things to help people, that people would come after you like that. But now I've kind of come to realize, okay, now I'm kind of twisted, to be honest with you. And so now when people like try to come after me, the harder they come after me, the more I realize I have to keep pushing,
Yeah.
because it means I'm really onto something.
Yep.
I'm kind of sick at this point, that I really feel sorry.
They've driven you to this, Kim. You realize it's not
Yeah,
your fault.
yeah. And it doesn't make me feel like at this point now it's just like motivation. And I tell my group, like, this means we're onto something. This means we're going to have a paradigm shift. Like, we really have to get this out. They don't want us to get it out. The more they don't want us to put it out there, the more we have to put it out there. So I've just taken it now, honestly, as a motivation. But what I will say is I met Mark Edwards, who was the scientist who sort of uncovered the Flint crisis, Flint,
Mm.
Michigan crisis. And you know, he's beat up. I mean, I look at him and I'm like, oh, because he got beat up and he was like,
Mm.
welcome. I'm like, welcome to what? Because I was like, and they really went after him, but he did it 5 times with lead, showing lead in drinking water. He did it in DC, he did it in Flint, he did it 5. He's
Unbelievable.
just a truth teller. He said, we're truth
Okay.
tellers. Fact of the matter is, there are very few of us truth tellers left. But and we get because we get the crud beat out of us, that's the truth.
Yeah.
But, as I say, I'm still standing and I'm going to keep being a truth teller. But there's getting to be fewer and fewer of us because we do get beat up.
Yeah, it's exhausting. I mean, I'm in a different sphere than both Kim and Tim here, but on the ground, like I'm just thinking of my most recent experience of being in a meeting last week when the director of special ed from my kid's school district tried to tell my husband and I that we were overly anxious about our child's health and that we just have different quote unquote opinions about um, what kind of clean air needs to happen in a school. And I respond like, no, like it's not a matter of an opinion. Like there are actual like laws and regulations to regulate clean air quality. Like there's Title 24 building code here in California. And they just like are completely dumbfounded. And so the amount of gaslighting that's happening both at, the small individual level as well as in the academia level and it's just it goes up and down the whole scale of the human experience. And for me, I just continue to reflect on like the life experiences and the upbringing I had that developed the resilience that I have to have the same approach that Kim and I were talking, we were like messaging about this, like it just makes us want to fight harder. And as a parent of young children, I just want to make sure as we look to the future and the kind of world that they're going to be growing up in, I want to make sure that I am fostering that same resilience in them, that they have the strength and resilience to push back against the injustices, against the hypocrisy, against the hatred, against the gaslighting, all of it, that they can stand up and speak truth and be bold and be willing to stand out and be different in the world that we're moving further and further in towards.
And this just ain't about clean air.
Exactly. Exactly.
As you were going through that list, I thought, boy, there's a lot of kids from coast to coast who are really afraid right now, right?
Yeah. It's really disheartening.
Yeah, it's kind of scary times right now. We work really hard to be an ally. Tim, I was listening to you talk about what's important is what we're doing here tonight. And before we started up tonight, MJ and I were kind of talking about like, should we still be doing
Oh,
Oh, we lost you, Christine, for a second.
yeah, lost her.
So, Christine, I don't know if you can hear me. I'll text you. Oh, yeah, you've gone mute. You're going to just try to come back?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I was just gonna say was that being here tonight and sharing this time has really sort of reaffirmed to me that we're okay to do this. Like we weren't really sure, right, MJ? Like,
Yeah, like I think we were getting a lot of feedback from people just saying, hey, are you going to do some more kind of thing? But for sure, we had a little trepidation about the Zoom thing. Um, but yeah, like still wondering if there's a place for people to want to come and chat and hear different people's perspectives and all that. I mean, I think, I've been looking at the chat, people are quite engaged, and I'm looking at the people who've attended and it looks like most people have stuck around right from the start to this point. And so I think And we look forward to hearing from you even afterwards, if you thought it was useful to come here. I know, like anytime, eh, Christine, that we feel, well, beat up or exhausted like everybody else, and
Yeah, like
oh,
Tim
it
was
takes so
talking
much,
about, like
right, so much
it's
work
it
to come, but we always feel
yeah.
better after, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now with everything being more,
Oh, we lost you again, Christine, so I'm not sure. Go out and go, I like mute and maybe try again. Nope. We'll give her one more shot.
can you hear me
Oh,
now?
yes. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I think it's just because I'm in an old house with stone walls, and so it's just nice to be back, and I'm happy to be here with you, and I'm happy that people want to hear these things from people. Happy to continue to do this. We just weren't really sure. Like, this was a little bit of a litmus test for us. At least it felt like that for me.
Yep, a little like touchdown and go, hey, do we still, does it still help? Is it still the one thing that you know what I did, and I'm going to recommend it to people. Um, almost exactly a year ago. It was the night or 2 nights before Valentine's Day last year. We had a Twitter space with a psychologist, Jonathan Douglas.
Oh yeah.
And we put this together because we were giving
Yeah.
well, just over time, we just saw everybody really struggling with, all the different relationships in their lives that were changing, whether it was an employment relationship, they want me to come back in person and whatever, or I wear a mask, they don't like it, or I want to go interview for something, should I wear my mask?
Partners who had separated,
Right. Partners who had separated but and are sharing custody
children.
of children. So you have one partner who was COVID informed or is, and you're keeping them safe. They're doing all the things, but then when that child goes to the partners or the ex's house, where maybe they have a completely different set of rules, how do you work with that? How do you deal with the grief around that? Where, the parts that you can't control, the parts that you can. We had talked about people who were chronically ill, and whose spouses are not, or their caregivers are not taking the care they need to keep them protected from getting worse. But in that position, they're not always able to step out of that relationship because they're chronically ill, that dependency and a bit of, coercive control kind of thing. Or what is it like when just other people in your house, maybe your kids aren't doing the massing anymore, but you are, and, all that. So there were so many things. We actually had a wonderful woman, Carrie, who helped assemble a lot of these stories from people before the space. We shared them with Dr. Douglas ahead of time, so we just sort of knew the general feelings people were having about different things, and then we talked about them. And it honestly, I listened again, and still, many of the things, there were no obvious solutions, and he wasn't going to be able to do that in one sort of call or chat. But I think it really just, again, just made people just aware that of all the things going on, and most people listening, I think, found themselves in one of those positions or knew what that was like. And then we acknowledged how exhausting that is, right? And that, we are now learning, if we didn't know before the pandemic, we learned what it's like to be people who are constantly just living in a state of survival. um, it's exhausting. Humans aren't really intended to be fighting like this for this long. And so even at this point, I'm going to just suggest, remembering that whatever we're feeling about things, it is completely proportionate to what is going on. And don't let anyone tell you that you're overreacting to anything, right? But I thought, since it is quite late, it's 10:30, and we do have lots that we could probably continue to talk about, but we do have to be cognizant of people's
Yeah,
brain
totally.
brain function. I did want to, if I can just someone, I shared it in the chat. It's a bit split up because it was so long it wouldn't do it in one post. So if you scroll up a bit, I won't read it now, but I'll let you have a moment to read it, and it's or you can copy and paste it or something. It was from a sociologist, Jennifer Walter, about what's happening in the country, in the US specifically. But I have to tell you, for those of us up in Canada, we are absolutely at the beginning stages, or well, we're a little more than beginning, but we are heading into a provincial election where we are now in Ontario, but also a federal one. And we have, like Trump light kind of version of someone running for prime minister here. and he's, fairly high up in the polls, much higher than we would ever want them to be, but we're dealing with the same thing. We have other premiers of a province in Alberta who's, you know, certainly aligns with many of the alt-right groups. And so we're running into that here. But this sociologist just gets into, you know, helping you deal with what she calls the overwhelm, right? That the overwhelm is the goal. And then she sort of points out 3 points about what that looks like and how it happens. And then suggests, what do you do? And so she suggests in the second part that I put, pick a couple of key issues that you deeply care about. Kim, I think this is what you were talking about. You did, right? And focus your attention there. You can't track everything, and that's by design. And then find trusted analysts. We talked about that. Tim, you did. Feeling overwhelmed is the point. When you recognize this, you regain some power. So take breaks, process. This is a marathon. And practice going slow, but wait 48 hours before reacting to new policies. It said the urgent clouds the important. And I thought that was a really good point. And build community, like we've often talked about. So, and what Tim was referring to too. So anyway, I just think it's a really, really maybe a really cool, helpful way to sort of end the main part of the conversation tonight. Tim, did you have anything you wanted to add before we do our last what's coming up for resistors and stuff?
No, not at all. It was just really great to be in the space, and the list that you posted is excellent. But I was commenting in the chat that it's a much more
Yeah, you
succinct
said,
version of what I was blathering on about. But
yeah, well,
yes,
no,
that's exactly it.
Tim put MJ's lost above. And I was like, who's lost? Maybe it was a typo. I'm like, hey, a second. Wait a
It's
second.
fixed.
I
It's
thought I was
fixed.
doing all right once I got out of flooding
It's
toilet.
fixed. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, pick
But
your
I
battles
guess
on it.
I guess the last thing I'd say too is just
Mm.
like exert use your friends and exert as much skepticism as possible, and just keep pushing for the things that you know are good.
Hey, Tim,
Yeah.
did you register a membership for the Liberal leadership race?
No, because then it makes it very difficult for me to comment on
Yeah.
such things.
It's
Okay.
Yeah.
such a personal
Copy.
question.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm a nervy broad. What can I
No, I
say?
don't mind. I don't mind a bit, but
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
no, because
I
yeah,
wondered what your impressions of Mr. Carney were. Can you say anything about that?
yeah, I mean that's absolutely. I mean, I have impressions. I just can't. I don't just to make sure that I maintain some distance when I'm providing commentary
Right.
in mainstream media. I'm not a member of any political party, and anybody who has followed me on social media knows that I really, really fucking hate partisanship.
I'm
But
just teasing you, buddy. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
teasing you because we're
yeah,
so like-minded that on this
yeah.
particular topic, I think.
But I think it's interesting for someone like me who looks at how people make decisions, and more specifically how their non-conscious parts of their brain participate in their decision making. That leadership contest is going to be quite the thing,
Mm.
because there's so much going on, and there is so much at stake, and people are staking out territory, not for the most part based on policy positions, but based on classic old schoolyard, I'm not his friend kind of politics,
Yeah.
trying to distance themselves from Trudeau. That I think it's interesting. And I think that what makes Carney's approach interesting today in a way it might not have been 20, 30 years ago. He would have been pretty bland 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think that's in some ways that's kind of his differentiating feature now,
Right.
is that he's really not trying to, he went he went on the Daily Show,
I know. He was
and
great with him.
I was going to say, and so one of the things about that is that clearly someone advised him to do it, and he decided to do it, but he used it in a way that most people don't. That he didn't try and turn it into an act. That he just was fairly human and engaging in a way I honestly wasn't quite expecting from him. So I
They
think
had
I think this
they
is
had
going to
a
be the
pretty sudden
weirdest.
they had a pretty sudden jump, didn't they? Like in terms of numbers following that appearance.
Oh, you know better than to get me going on polls, but yeah,
Okay,
Yeah,
that
I
sorry,
know. I
sorry.
was gonna
yeah,
say I
that's
don't like polls.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
sorry.
and I mean that one is it's always interesting just to see those variations from the norm.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but I think you have to take them with an incredibly huge, well,
I pay
probably an
attention to
entire
Frank
canister of
Graves.
salt. Yeah.
I like to pay attention to Frank Graves. I don't know
Oh,
if you follow.
Mm,
I'm gonna just step in really
yeah, no
quickly.
comment.
So Tim, I'm just gonna, sorry, only because I can see the time. And so I want to
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time tonight. We always love your perspective on things and we hope you'll come back again sometime.
It was a pleasure anytime.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, buddy. Nice having you with us tonight.
Kim, I see your message. Come on before you fall asleep there. Do you want to say goodnight?
I'm gonna say goodnight.
Yes.
I haven't even stopped for food today. It's
Yeah,
been
no,
Oh,
nonstop. So yeah, but it's been really enjoyable and I'm honored to have been on your 100th show. Congratulations to you
woohoo!
both. You're
thanks,
doing a
Cam.
huge amount for everybody and it's very comforting to me, and grounding to me to be back with you both and everybody. And so thank you. As I say, I'm honored that you asked me to be here for your special night. And of course you're needed and you still play it. It was weird not having you around. So this is
Hmm.
awesome. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. You
Thanks,
take care of
Cam.
yourself, okay, as you're working
Take
so hard.
Okay.
care.
Okay. Thank you both. We'll be in
Thank you,
touch.
Yeah.
Keep,
Cam.
Okay.
we'll have to talk about food next time.
Yes.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
down with that.
All right. Perfect. Bye-bye,
Bye,
everybody.
Kim.
Bye.
Liesl, we'd love to hear from you before we close out the evening.
Hello, everyone, again.
Thank
Yeah.
you for joining us.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for inviting me. It's just such a wonderful community. So many useful things were shared tonight. I learned so much from everybody in the chat and from everyone who was speaking, and just really grateful for the community that we have here. And like Tim was saying, it's just really important for us to continue to gather and to connect and to hold true to our values and pick something that's really meaningful for us and go fight for it.
We're
Thank you,
with you on
Liesl.
that one.
Thanks so much, for being here. We know it's a long night for you too, with all you're doing and with kids. So thank you so
Yeah,
much
I'm
for
gonna go.
being here. It's a real honor to have you here, and thanks for all the work you did to help people
Oh,
through
thank
the
you. I'm gonna go put my
wildfires.
kids to bed.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
So listen, what we'll do really quickly before people head out is we'll just talk a little bit about give a two shout outs and let you know what's coming up for ReSisters because this went pretty well, I think, in terms at least knock on wood, we didn't have a tea space go down on us, so that's kind of nice. A shout out to the Canadian COVID Society. They're looking for people with long COVID to share their stories. So, if it's a challenging thing to do, perhaps you can lean on a loved one to help you do it. But they're wanting to compile these stories leading up to International Long COVID Awareness Day on March 15th. They're making some plans to have things go on here in Canada. And thank you to Ricochet Media for a recent article on the need for post-secondary institutions to do better in response to COVID, highlighting the cognitive decline in people based on the number of infections they get, et cetera. And so I'm really grateful as someone who has someone in university and another one on her way, and how little post-secondary is doing and higher learning my ass kind of thing. So thank you for that piece. Episode 101 next week on some platform, and maybe you guys can even under our resistors handle let us know how you think this works out. Assuming that another time, perhaps if it's, if there's lots of listeners, you might not get on the live one, but you might see the recording on YouTube. Would that be as enjoyable for you? You can let us know those kinds of things. But episode 101, we'll let you know between now and next Wednesday where we'll be to have it. We're having Julia Doubleday on with us. She's the writer of The
Yay.
Gauntlet. Yeah, and she writes about COVID and public health. And she is a long COVID sufferer as well. And we're really honored to have her on. She's written some really thought-provoking pieces. So I highly recommend if you're thinking of joining us, if you don't know much about her, you can check her out at thegauntlet.news and see her work there. And down the road, we're looking at a few other guests and stuff. We have a number of people who've agreed. And again, it's always just a matter of finding the days that they can come. So you'll hear more about those people after we have Julia on next week. So I guess really, Christine, is there anything that you wanted to say before we say our final good night?
Quickly, just want to remind everyone, take a look at the names around the screens tonight. If there's, you want to follow each other on Blue Sky or the other place, if you're still in the other place. But Blue Sky primarily, and we're gonna kind of figure this out, right, MJ?
We're going to figure it out because by golly, Tim told us we've got to keep doing this. Let's go.
I know. Honestly, I'm too old for this shit, MJ. I'm too old for this.
Not yet.
They want to come for our vote.
Yeah, sons of bitches. They're not going to get it. Well, they'll get our vote, but not where they
biscuits.
want it. Until our next space, wherever it is, please share the recording when we post it on our YouTube channel. We'll post it under our handles on Blue Sky and on Twitter, just so people can access it to help inform your loved ones and your communities. So let's keep focused in that chaos. Thanks for coming, everybody. It's so great to see you. Good night.
And we'll see you guys on the flip side.